Good evening, everybody. This is the Town of Fairfax Planning Commission, Thursday, December, what day is it?
16th,
2021. And due to the declared state of emergency and to ensure the health and safety of the public by limiting human contact that could spread the COVID-19 virus, and pursuant to AB 361 and Fairfax Town Council Resolution number 2040, this meeting will be held via teleconference only. There will be no in-person meeting location. The public can participate in the meeting in real time as follows. You can go to the website, https://www.townoffairfax.org/watch-live-2/. Or you can go to the Community Media Center of Marin's website and watch there. Or you can click on the Zoom link in the Planning Commission's agenda for tonight. You can call in at area code 669-900-6833 or 346-248-7799. The webinar ID is 842-7052-1962. Members of the public may provide public comment during the meeting using one of the following options. On Zoom, you can select the raise hand function during the public comment time, and you'll be unmuted when it's your turn. If you are calling in, press *9 during the public comment time to raise your hand and *6 to be unmuted to speak. Prior to 3 p.m. on the day of the meeting, members of the public may submit written comments to the Planning Commission. If comments are received after the circulation of the Commission's meeting packet, but prior to the meeting, they will be sent to the Planning Commission and will be part of the meeting record, but will not be read aloud. So let's do our call to order and then our roll call to order. Everybody come to order. Roll call, please.
yes, Member Swift,
Here.
Member Kelly,
Here.
Member Jansen,
It didn't work. Here.
Chair Newton,
Here.
and it's noted that Member Green is absent excused, and Member Gonzalez-Parber has unexpectedly had to resign from the commission.
And I'm here.
Oh, I'm sorry. The most important one,
Yeah,
Member
right.
Fregoso.
Right. She's here.
All right, thank you. And so we'll do approval of the agenda. If anybody has any changes to the agenda, let us know now. Otherwise, if someone has a motion to approve, that would be great.
I will move approval of the agenda, not hearing any changes.
Thank you. Any second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Kelly, thank you. And Ben, if you'll just take the roll for that.
Yes, Member Swift,
Yes.
Member Kelly,
Yes.
Member Jansen,
Yes.
Member Fregoso,
Yes.
and Chair Newton.
Yes, thank you. What's next? We go to the meeting protocol. So I'll read the meeting protocol. The chair shall maintain order at the meetings in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order, and the commission has the responsibility to be a model of respectful behavior in order to encourage community participation and citizen input at commission meetings. The commission and the audience are expected to refrain from using profane language and or ridiculing the character or motive of commission members, staff, or members of the public, and to maintain the standards of tolerance and civility. Okay. Now we're going on to the public comments on the non-agenda items, and anyone wishing to address the commission on matters that are not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the commission must do so by email or in person via Zoom in the manner described above. Presentations will be limited to 3 minutes or as otherwise established by the commission chair. All persons are invited to participate in public hearings. In order to give all interested persons an opportunity to be heard and to ensure the presentation of all points of view, members of the audience should limit their presentation to 3 minutes, provide their comments by email as described above, state view and concerns succinctly, submit any new documents to the planning staff first via email to be entered into the record. And now, drum roll, let's do the election of the new chair of the Planning Commission. I'm so excited. And
Chair Newton, I'm sorry, did
Oh,
you
was
take
that
public
first?
comment? Chair Newton, I'm sorry, did you take public comment?
no, I didn't take public comment. All right.
Oh, I thought the election was afterwards.
Right.
Well, the one I have says that's after public comment on
Oh,
non-agenda.
you're absolutely right, Chair.
And I really appreciate our behind the scenes Maven reminding me of that. So let's see if there are any hands raised. If you'd like to make a statement about an item that is not on the agenda, we do have one hand raised, Colin McDonald. Sorry about that. So you'll be up and you can unmute yourself. There you go.
Thanks very much, Chair Newton. I'm Colin McDonald from the Hen House Brewing Company. I was at the meeting last month to introduce myself. I have to say I'm a little bit bummed out we didn't get our application all the way through to be considered in the meeting this month, but I'm really looking forward to getting on to the January agenda. The planning department has been super helpful for us, and I'm super grateful for them in kind of guiding us towards how to present correctly. And I know that there's been I would hope not for reasons of our business, but for context, that there's been a lot of concern about making sure that there's full transparency on the question of us as a formula business. I'm entirely confident that we're not, and that y'all will be thoroughly satisfied that we're not a formula business. But I did want to just stop in and say that we're, again, incredibly excited about being part of the Fairfax community, of bringing fun stuff to the Fairfax community, of keeping everybody who is employed at Iron Springs employed, and trying to move really quickly to keep those jobs in the community. And I'd encourage everyone on the commission to, if there are comments or concerns about what we're doing at the old Iron Springs location, to please pass those along to the planning department such that we can address those directly, because really we're super excited about being in Fairfax. The response we've been getting has been super great, and we just want to move quickly and move transparently such that everybody can feel satisfied that we're meeting the parameters that y'all have put in place to keep the city of Fairfax an awesome, interesting, unique community.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald. All right, let's see if there's anybody else who has their hand up. I don't see anyone else. And so I guess I get to close the public comment on non-agenda items. And again, thank you for showing up and speaking to us. I think as it says in the canned script I read at the beginning of the meeting, we really do encourage public comment. So I want to thank you very much for that. And now we get to go to my favorite part of the meeting, the election of the new chair and the new vice chair. And
I'd like to jump in very quickly and express my profound gratitude for the incredible job that the chair has done this last year. This isn't her first time at the helm, and we know that Chair Newton truly sets the standard, the gold standard for ably chairing meetings, organizing the discussions on many diverse and confusing in many ways topics, and keeping the meeting going forward, forging consensus, treating everybody respectfully. So to you, Mimi, thank you for all you've done and will continue to do, no doubt.
Thank you from all of us, Mimi.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ben. Thank you for those very kind words. But really, without further ado, we should get to the business of electing a new chairman and a new vice chairman. And I want to thank Vice Chairman Fregoso for her service as vice chair. And she's done that before, and she's done the chairmanship before. So thank you for being the vice chair while I was
Well,
the chair.
thank you, Mimi, but you didn't leave a whole lot for me to pick up after. You've attended probably every single meeting, and I got to take it easy being vice chair. Not the same when one is chair. Point of order, being vice chair, does vice chair automatically go to chair, or do we nominate still?
But it's still a nomination. I mean, the standard protocol is that the vice chair is used as a kind of a training period for the person who will ascend to the throne of chairpersonship. So stranger things have happened, but that's the typical protocol.
Would the vice chair be interested in serving as the chair over the course of 2022, which looks to be a very interesting year?
The vice chair has seriously considered it and would be interested in going for it. Should be a very interesting year.
Are there other commissioners who are interested in going for it?
And being chair next year?
Not myself, but I have a question. Is the current chair also interested in being the chair for the next year, if that is possible?
No.
No. She probably needs a break.
I'm not
Okay.
interested in all of it.
How about
Thank you.
vice chair, Mimi? How about vice
No,
chair?
I've done my round. I
You
get to go
certainly
back to
have.
the bottom of the list, and I will cherish the long road back up to the top. Over.
Well, in an effort to move things along, and if there is not another volunteer or recommendation, I will accept the position of chair for next year, and that allows us to move forward with a new vice chair, which will also be a critical position this coming year, possibly more so than prior years. And are we ready for nominations?
Yes, somebody should make a motion.
Do we move on the chair first?
Correct. That's what I would recommend.
Are there any motions from the commission?
Well, based on what we heard, I could make a motion to make Commissioner Fregoso submit her as being the next chair.
Is there a second?
That's a second time.
All right, so Ben, we've got a motion and a second. So let's take a roll call.
Yes, Commissioner Swift,
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly.
Yes.
I'll take that as a yes. Commissioner Jansen,
Aye.
Commissioner Fregoso,
I guess so.
and soon to be ex-chair Newton. You're muted, Mimi. She's still muted.
You're muted.
Chair Newton, you accidentally muted yourself when you went to unmute yourself.
Oh my gosh, I was giving the speech of my life.
I can tell.
I'm saying that as soon as
Oh,
I
no.
say yes, I will be the ex-chair, so I'm going to drag it out as long as possible and say, thank you to staff, to Tamala, to Ben, to Linda, to Kara, and Andy, thank you for your work with us this year. And yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. So the next question is Vice Chair. I will first announce that although he is in absentia at this meeting, I spoke to Commissioner Green, and he did say that if he were elected, he would serve. So, that's one of those classic tactics, right? If you don't show up, you get appointed. But that's not to tilt the discussion or the decision in any way. I just wanted to say that if people are looking for a volunteer.
A sacrificial lamb.
Yes, especially this upcoming year, which promises to be very interesting.
Would he be more available than he has been in prior years? Did you have a discussion with him about his rigorous schedule?
He indicated that he felt that his schedule should lighten up after the very earliest part of the year. So yes, I did discuss that with him a little bit, and he indicated that he thought that there was going to be kind of an intense period initially. How he does it, how anybody who works full-time does it, I applaud you all. But he did say that he would be available if selected.
Where'd Cindy go?
She's hiding.
Oh, well, because now she's not in the room either, or she's just on her mic or something. So I could nominate her for vice chair. Just to spite her while she's off camera.
Oh, she heard you.
I didn't hear you, but I was putting the puppy away.
I would second that.
So what did I miss?
Well, we're about to take the vote on whether you ascend to vice chair.
Oh, yeah. We should discuss with Commissioner. There was
Phil Green's.
Right. So I think that's why we should have a discussion as opposed to let me get away with stuff while people are out of the room. So I nominated you for vice chair, Commissioner Swift, while you were out of the room. Over.
But also, Cindy, did you hear Phil Green's comment about being vice? Or were you out of the room as well at that time?
No, I was in the room at that time when you were discussing his willingness to serve.
If I may say something, so yeah, I see two candidates, and because Commissioner Swift is in the room, I think that's where we need to start. I think both are very well recommended, very viable. So I would vote for either one of them. But I think
one thing I wonder, given the phase of the housing element that we're moving into, is whether it might not be helpful to have another attorney, as we did with our current year chair, a legal background as we move into the final stretches could be a very helpful thing for the Planning Commission.
Well, I think we have two very good candidates. And I think if Cindy expressed an interest and willingness in serving, I would include that information. And I think then we'd have information about two candidates and whether they were even willing to serve. And we could.
I absolutely agree. And Planning Commissioner Swift has been chair and vice, and does have now several years experience with the Planning Commission, though honestly, I was also going to mention that Robert Jensen's and also Brett's experience with architecture can also be incredibly important, given that we're moving into this form-based planning that kind of requires an architectural perspective to be able to move that along. And I wonder if, I don't know that Robert expressed a willingness, but, and while you are one of the newer members of the commission, I think it would be, it is very beneficial to have your architectural expertise and understanding of development and how that occurs as we move forward. The same for Brett, probably. You have that architectural background, but I do have, we have more months experience seeing Robert process the form-based planning, the odds program that we're moving into. So I would say we have three excellent potential chairs.
I appreciate that, Commissioner Fago. So I had not volunteered and still feel quite new in this whole arena. Of course, I do understand the architectural components in the background, but there's more to it than just that. So yes, I can certainly see myself doing that. I'd be honored to take the responsibility, but being so new, that's why I didn't volunteer this year yet.
Yeah, I'll sort of echo Robert's sentiment there, that I'll just let you all know that I've been relishing my low status on the totem pole, meaning I'm a little, I don't know about this idea that you could circle to the bottom. I think maybe you could circle to the middle somehow. I'm glad to stay at the low end of the totem pole for now. Thank you.
Okay, I would be willing to serve.
And between Commissioner Green and Commissioner Swift, we have two excellent candidates, I will say. And one of the things I've really appreciated about Commissioner Green is that he does a lot of research before things come up, and he spies things from an angle that I don't necessarily spy, and he brings definitely a lot of experience and thought to his work. And I do also think that Commissioner Swift is perpetually prepared, perpetually looking at the big picture, and so involved in our town in a way that, she sees connections on different levels that I really appreciate, Cindy. Thank you so much. And, I think that, we could choose either Phil or Cindy and come out, really good, strong planning commission. And again, I echo your thoughts about the architectural experience in terms of all of the benefits that everybody provides in their little way here on this this team as we kind of move towards a very difficult effort in terms of the general plan amendments. And so I don't know, I would so I'm not chair anymore, so I get to nominate somebody. Oh, wow, there's so much freedom involved.
You did nominate somebody.
No, I mentioned names. We didn't actually get to nominations, I don't think. We heard from both Cindy and Commissioner Green that they would accept the nomination. So I think I will move to nominate Commissioner Swift for vice chair.
I'd like to second that.
You're on mute.
If the chair wants to call for the roll call vote, we have a motion and a second for Commissioner Swift as Vice Chair of the Planning Commission. That would be you, Norma.
Oh, I'm already the chair? I call for, oh, okay. I
Excuse me.
thought it was the next
It
meeting.
happened so quickly.
I totally blanked. Okay, so as the chair, I call for the vote on the nomination.
Okay. This is for the selection of Commissioner Swift as Vice Chair for the Planning Commission for the year 2022. I'll now take a vote. Commissioner Kelly,
Yes.
Commissioner Jansen,
Aye.
Commissioner Newton,
Aye.
and Commissioner Fregosa.
Aye.
Okay, that.
And do you
is-
ask Commissioner Swift her vote or not?
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Swift.
Aye.
Okay, that's a 5-0 vote. Thank you and congratulations to the new officers. It will be my pleasure and privilege to serve you this next year.
Thank you, Ben, and staff. You're all quite wonderful to us. So then I'm continuing to chair this meeting, huh?
You got it.
If that is the case, then we've not reviewed the consent calendar. I don't see anything on consent calendar. And did we ask about, we've already confirmed the agenda. We're not making any changes to the agenda, right? So we'll move on with the discussion items. Number one on our discussion items, that is housing safety element, housing site options, housing and safety element update, the workshop, and is that the order you'll be presenting them in, Ben?
Well, actually, this was selected before we had the PowerPoint slide, so it will be adjusted somewhat. They all fall under the subheading or the main heading of the housing safety element, and primarily housing. So with no further ado, I'll just introduce this, that as we've been going through this housing element process for the last 9 months, and had numerous meetings, including with your commission and subcommittees of this commission, we're starting to firm up certain discussions and decisions and recommendations. One of the things we have before you tonight is our housing site options and a presentation of the work that's occurred to date, and a discussion of those specific housing site options in the context of the overall work that we've done on the housing element. This will be used, this will feed into a town council meeting on the same topic in January. We don't have a date for that yet because it will be a separate meeting from their normal meeting, which has been moved to the 19th of January. So with no further ado, I will introduce Andy Flower from EMC Planning, who will be making the majority of the slide presentation, although I will be chiming in on certain topics. Take it away, Andy.
Thank you, Ben. It's been a pleasure to work with you through this process. And I do want to put an emphasis on draft. This is very much a draft sites inventory, and that this is a process-oriented discussion this evening, and that we're aiming to be extremely transparent as we move through our steps in the process. And we're excited to work with all of the planning commissions in these next steps. So I will begin my presentation, and Ben, I appreciate you chiming in when appropriate, or when you have something to share. We also have one moment in the middle of the slideshow where we were hoping that the planning commissioners would also chime in. So we, as Ben mentioned, we've been working through the housing element update, and tonight we're going to see let's see if I can get I apologize. There we go. Okay. So our agenda this evening, we're going to do just a quick overview of the housing element. And many of you are already aware of what we're doing here, but we want to make sure that anyone tuning in new or maybe watching this as a recording, that they understand the context by which we're speaking this evening. We'll talk about our outreach update, things that we're doing in front of the scenes, things that we're doing behind the scenes, and a little bit about our numbers so far in both our workshop and in the follow-on with our balancing act tool. Changes in housing law, potential site review, and that's going to take up quite a bit of our time. We're anticipating, because we are going to go site by site, just as we did in the workshop. We want to make sure that everybody's up to speed, up to date on these individual sites. We'll look at the table of potential sites, and we'll briefly discuss accessory dwelling units and SB 9, and look at our draft initial affordability table, which was an attachment, not an appendix. It was an attachment to your staff report, and that was yes, we'll get to that. Okay. So recommendations for this evening: staff requests that the Planning Commission provide direction on the following: that our proposed housing sites and preliminary housing number assignments. We'd love to hear back from you on that. Feedback on the public outreach and engagement process. Areas for further investigation relating to the housing and safety elements, and any CEQA comments. So, a housing element overview. What is a housing element? For those tuning in new to this process, we want you to understand that the housing element is a plan for housing needed in a community for both current and future housing needs. And the town of Fairfax does not build the housing. Instead, this is part of our general plan, which is intended to be a reflection of the community's vision for the future. The town of Fairfax creates the programs and policies to plan where the new housing should go and how many housing units could be on potential sites. So why does Fairfax need to plan for more housing? It is required by the state law. As I mentioned, it's part of the general plan. And this section of the general plan gets updated every 8 years. This is Fairfax's 6th cycle timeline, and it begins 2023 and ends 2031. We may speak of the term RHNA, which is an acronym meaning the Regional Housing Needs Allocation. And this is a target number for homes needed and assigned to Fairfax by the state through the Association of Bay Area Governments. How many future units? In Fairfax, we're looking at a total of 490 units, and it's divided up according to affordability, with 149 very low income units, 86 low income units, 71 moderate, and 184 above moderate rate units. Where are we in the process? Well, our initial goal here this evening, what we're working towards, is getting our site options clear so that we can assess path for environmental review. Once we know what sites will be included in the inventory, we can start the environmental review. In the future, we'll be discussing policy options and affordability. So our outreach updates with our website, fairfaxspeaks.com. Through that engagement, we've received in the past month 770 site visits and 34 new site registrations. Our Fairfax Housing Tool, also known as the Balancing Act, we've received 47 total submittals, including 2 in Spanish. We've extended the deadline for this tool to be open to receive comments that will be folding into our next the council report that we do next on this topic. So it will remain open through the end of this month, December 31st. And if you're curious about what the planned Fairfax Housing Tool is, this is a sneak peek, and it's available on our website, fairfaxspeaks.com. And the planned Fairfax Housing Tool is a way for the public to see which sites Fairfax is considering, choose which sites you'd like to see future housing built, select how many new units you'd like to see for each potential housing site. And again, it will be available through the end of this month. So For our website, we now have it available in both English and Spanish for all 3 sections. And the first section relays basic information about what a housing element update is. The second one, sites information. So we have details for each of the sites that are being considered currently. And the third one is a link to the Plan Fairfax housing tool. When we introduced the community workshop on November 20th, the feedback that we received, and I'm sorry, it does say website feedback. That's a bit of a typo. The feedback that we see during the community workshop, we asked the same question twice. How confident do you feel about your knowledge of the housing element update process? We asked it in the beginning and at the end, and you can see here that the information that we received shows that people's confidence was built throughout the process of our workshop. So changes in housing law. It's important to know that there is a paradigm shift occurring right now with housing law. We're dealing with at least 70 new housing laws since Cycle 5 housing element update. And these new laws continue to be changing throughout the process. And one example of that is SB 9, which some of you may be aware of. And it's essential that we be prepared for the possibility of more shifts on the horizon. So this process of a site inventory is that we identify specific sites that are available and reasonable for at least that RENA number, which is 490 housing opportunities. And rezoning and adopting programs will likely be necessary. And yes, so map of potential sites. Here we've got our list of sites that we'll be discussing this evening and that have been incorporated in with our outreach and our feedback. We've asked people to comment specifically on each of these sites if they have any responses that they would like to share with us. And here's just a zoom in so that you can see that site number 16 is the central commercial downtown area in full. And you can see some of the other details like with sites 11 and 12. So Ben, shall we begin going through these sites?
Sure. Thank you, Andy. Yeah, I just wanted to, I'm sure the commission is familiar with this to a certain extent, but just to give everybody an opportunity, some of whom may not have either visited our Fairfax Speaks website or attended the November 20th workshop, just to make sure everybody knows which sites we're considering at this time. The first one is the White Hill School site. This is just beyond the school physical proper location. It's approximately 5 acres. Preliminarily, staff believes it has the possibility for 50 to 80 units. It's noted that housing can be designated for school district employees and that the Marin County School District serving K through 12 has 6,000 employees who are in a very serious need for housing. That's an ongoing issue. Go ahead, Andy.
Ben, I'm wondering, I see Vice Chair Swift's hand raised, and I didn't know if we were taking comments.
Oh, yeah. One thought we had was to loop back to specific questions that we have, just so we make sure we get through this. And then we'd be happy to retrace slides or whatever. So unless it's something you really want to ask right now, I'd love to try to get through the sites inventory first.
Let me ask the question because it's a general question that applies to this list of possible sites that may be helpful at the beginning of this.
Sure.
Can you identify, and when Andy just went through his slides, he talked about available and reasonable housing sites. You know, and I mean, I look at this list and there's things there that I'm not sure are available and reasonable, but can you speak in general terms to where this list came from of possible sites, and then how you address the minimum capacity of number of units per site. And that would be kind of general information that would apply to the entire table. That might be helpful.
But Ben and Cindy, Ben, aren't you doing that sort of with each site as you discuss it?
Well, I could certainly.
What Cindy's asking right now?
Right.
I mean, just very generally.
Right. So just generally speaking, several of these sites were identified because, as for example, with this site, it's vacant and it's not heavily utilized. We have had conversations with the school district, and obviously there'd be work to do with the Ross Valley School District to really flesh this out as a housing site, but they're certainly interested in exploring that in conjunction with the town. In terms of the size of the site, we have a table at the very end, so I think we could start talking about where we see the density numbers going. But this is a total of 5 acres. Obviously, it's not going to be developed on its entirety, but when you crunch the numbers, and you will see in the table how we relate density to each site. Andy, next slide, please.
Thank you, Ben. If I could just add one thing.
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. There was a question about how we came to these sites, and at prior planning commission meetings, and we want to encourage people to maybe go backwards in time and revisit some of the presentations that we've given in the past that talk about how we first closely looked at our safety element and many of the safety concerns that residents and staff have for where would maybe be the best locations for sites. So that was certainly one of the first lenses by which we identified potential sites. And yes, we'll be getting to the reasonableness of the sites. Right now, we're still in that phase of saying that everything's on the table until it's off. And that's why we're now collecting comments and ideas from the public. And Ben will be speaking to some possible new sites as well that have come out of this process.
Thank you, Andy. And you raised a good point, which was the philosophy that we had going in. And this was discussed at the council level and at the Affordable Housing Committee level, where the general philosophy of basically keeping everything on the table until there was further discussion that eliminated it. And what you see before you has been through some preliminary vetting, including, very importantly, the public comments we received at the November 20th workshop, and subsequently with the Planned Fairfax Housing interactive tool. So we feel that what we're proposing before the Planning Commission, and certainly we want to get the Commission's comments and feedback about your viewpoints about the suitability of sites and the numbers and any other questions and comments you may have.
Thank you, Ben. One more point. At this point in time, it's better if we end up with a list that's longer than what we will end up with at the very end, because this is what will lead us into our environmental review. So better that we have more than will be counted in the end at this point in time.
Okay, the Jehovah's Witness Kingdom Hall site. And again, I think we're taking our cue with the religious sites from the Baptist site, where we recognize that certain sites do not seem to receive a lot of utilization. And this is one of them. Staff has attempted to reach out to the church officers and have not been successful in establishing contact with them. But if there are contact people, I'd love to hear it. It's simply noted that much like other sites seem to be underutilized and then became available, I think it behooves us to look at these opportunity sites, start discussing the potential for housing development. And this is one of them out there on 2600 Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. It has kind of a bowl-shaped area that's relatively flat.
Ben, can I add one comment to what you just said about underutilized and institutional type properties that are out there. Did you say that you're contacting the owners, or you've just happened to have had some contact with some owners? Are you doing a strategic contact?
Yes, in every case where there's been a new site proposed that wasn't on the former housing element, and we just discussed the one new site where we were not able to establish contact with the owners, the Kingdom Hall people. The Jehovah's Witnesses are very quiet, and so we've
because so I'm sorry. So two questions in that regard. Thank you. One is, if they object, can we still identify the site? Are they able to object and not have their site listed as potential?
Well, as a property owner, you pretty much control the future of the site. I will say that we have not had anybody register an objection. I think a lot of them sort of say, well, if that's what the town wants to do, we would certainly consider it. So I would say that if there was opposition to consideration of somebody's site, we would probably remove it. We would first have a conversation with them about what our goals are, and just kind of keeping things on the table, understanding that things change. We're reusing many sites. For example, the site that you have in front that you're now looking at Tenalima.
And I'll let you move forward with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is a reuse. And we know this site was formerly shown in the prior or the current housing element. In fact, it was a site for which I believe there was a charrette conducted. And it's definitely a potential housing development site. The owner and the owner's representative have expressed an interest in consideration of the site for housing. Under the zoning, it would not require a rezoning. It does have a potential historic resource, the old building on it. But even that, when I had a discussion with the owner's representative, the feeling was that might be adaptable for something like a duplex or a quadplex when you look at the building closely. So this is one of those sites that, as it is a reused site, would take some additional effort on the town's part as we go through this housing element to sort of raise the likelihood that this could become housing. This goes to Vice Chair Swift's comment about the availability and the reasonableness. So this is definitely one that's on the table for future housing. Next slide, please. St. Rita's Church. St. Rita's is one of those broad brush sites where they have a current parish and operations. I have spoken to Father Ware personally. He understands the context in which the town is placing this. This does not entail the portion of the site that includes the school, but doesn't include the current community center, which is the historic church that you see in the lower left of the slide. So again, this is simply representing the fact that many of these church and religious parcels are undergoing reconsideration for future use. And we may end up in a situation where it becomes available at some point. So it behooves us to include this in our inventory. It's also noted that there are historic buildings, even though they haven't been designated as such. So that's a separate issue. Next slide. West Side Commercial. Okay, this is a little bit tricky because the Fairfax Market site there's like a gap in the middle. You see that green? And so it doesn't include that. It starts basically where the St. Rita's Church property ends and goes down to the edge of the Fairfax Market site. It includes that mound, that undeveloped mound that's next to the parking lot for Fairfax Market. It also includes the former Kunst Automotive site, which you see is kind of that cheese-shaped wedge. It does not include the Marin Bicycle Museum site at the corner of Klaus Drive there, but it has several acres. This, again, was previously discussed in the current housing element as an opportunity site. we're not sure what the specifics of the individual owners, but we feel that it's appropriate to designate them, for example, or continue to designate them insofar as some of them are clearly vacant or underutilized at this time. Next slide. Fairfax Market. This is a site where we have an owner and an architect who are definitely interested in pursuing housing development on the site. We believe it has room for 20 to 40 units. It's currently the parking lot. Our future concept at this point, and I would emphasize that everything we're doing right now is conceptual, would be some sort of shared parking over a portion of the site. And it may be possible if the owner to the north in this slide or further up is interested to try to combine some housing development in that location. It is in the highway commercial zoning, which prohibits housing on the first floor. So this talks to the question of potential rezoning, depending on how we constitute that, whether it's a vertical mixed use or exclusively housing. Next slide, please. School Street Plaza. This is another site which your commission is aware the owner is interested in development. He's already come up some years ago before my time with a proposal. The number of units out there reflects the owner's interest in that. This is an important site. It has a number of benefits, including proximity to the downtown commercial area. The current zoning would not require rezoning to achieve this. There is some preliminary thinking by staff that this might be an area where we, with the higher density involved with this, we would achieve affordability by design, potentially. So an interesting site. It obviously has current housing, renters who are occupying housing on that site. And so we would need to integrate efforts to avoid displacement if this were to be redeveloped as a housing site. Next slide. Marinda Heights, and we'll get to the results of our planned Fairfax housing survey. Not surprisingly, this one wasn't extremely popular, but it is currently still the site of a proposed subdivision, a 10-lot subdivision on the 100 acres, consistent with the zoning. It's also acknowledged that under current state law, with ADUs and JADUs being ministerial, that there would be up to 30 potential units on this site under the current zoning. There's also a question with the SB 9 regulations of whether somebody could take a 10-acre parcel and subsequently divide it up into a 5-acre parcel. I'd be curious to see the commission's comments about this site, specifically insofar as given where the state has already directed with their regulations, whether consideration of more clustered housing at the bottom of the site might be an option to consider. Doing so would require rezone. Next slide. Deer Park Villa. This is a site that is currently being used for a variety of purposes. I think they're coming up on their 100th year in 2022. So congratulations to the Garangeli family for a job well done, surviving or approaching their century mark. But in any event, I'm sure everybody watching has been to that site at one point or another. There is potential land available facing on Wood Lane. This is a site where the owner hasn't proposed anything, but is basically willing to consider the town's recommendations going forward. Next slide. The former Pancho Villa site. In terms of the feasibility of this site, it's been vacant for some time. The town staff had looked at a pre-application, a couple of years ago, by the same people who developed that very attractive new development, I think on the corner of 4th and H. I could be getting my alphabet wrong, but it's pretty well-known site, the white building there, mixed-use building. And they had come in for a 10-unit development. So staff considered that a pretty decent starting point for a conversation about potential housing on that site. It's also noted that it has amenities such as proximity to a bus stop. And I would further point out that all of these sites do not suffer from what staff considers severe access issues, for example, in the event of an emergency, that we've already integrated into our criteria for potential housing sites, this notion that we're not going to put anything where it would take a lot of driving on a windy street. For the most part, we've even eliminated one way in, one way out sites. There may be one exception to that for a street that's relatively wide, but this one, for example, is directly on the main evacuation route for town. Next slide. O'Donnell Nursery. This is another site which is being discussed because of its potential, basically kitty corner to the Pancho Villa site. The owner isn't proposing anything. I've had a couple of conversations with him. He's willing to entertain what the town's interest is in future housing. As a smaller site, it would not be the site of a lot of housing, but it's one of those infill sites that has that potential. Next slide. East Side Commercial. This was previously proposed in the current housing element, and we believe it still retains the potential for housing units. It fronts directly on Sir Francis Drake, and there's a multiplicity of ownerships on this. So likely, if it were developed, it would be kind of in an incremental fashion. Because it's in the CH zone, there's a possibility if ground floor commercial were desired that, or excuse me, ground floor residential were desired, that there would need to be rezoning. There is also some residential use on these sites already, some of these sites. So we would need to address any displacement issues as part of future development. Next slide. The Fair Anselm Shopping Center. This is one where various people have been contacting us, not necessarily the owner, but when we start getting inquiries from realtors, it tells us that there is something interest in the development community in this site. And you can see from this that where we're focusing on is not the area that's currently being occupied by Good Earth, because that's obviously one of our very successful grocery stores, supermarkets in town, and the parking for that, but rather further to the west on the north side of Center Boulevard, which is the area for the coffee shop. I don't drink coffee, so I forget the name, but I'll think of it in a minute, and associated parking. And then the majority of the site is to the south of Center Boulevard. The existing buildings that comprise that area, from the dry cleaners on one side to the karate studio to the west, and the parking on both sides. And so the question would be, how would we best approach a redevelopment of that site? Would it be a mixed use commercial, for example? It's a strong possibility, but that's a pretty decent sized site. And that's why we are coming up with the number of housing units that we've listed. Town and Country. This is a fascinating site. It's interesting how that one came up, not so much outlining the property, but as your commission is undoubtedly aware, it comprises, yes, Andy's doing a little circle around that, the open area and the surrounding, bounded by the creeks and the base of the slope to the south, climbing up to forest. This is a 25-acre site. It has a property owner that is interested in considering future uses. We know it has dozens of tenants at this time, and displacement would be an important consideration, one which the owner has also said he is committed to advocating for retention of those people. When we put it in our planned Fairfax housing discussion, we decided to put a broad range given the size of the site and the fact that it's proximity, its relative flatness, et cetera. And so we listed 100 to 450, and we'll get to the results of what public comment we've had to date so far. It's noted that this has some substantial constraints. For example, access and egress to the site uses a really substandard bridge, and there would probably need to be a new access point punched in to go to that site and create some kind of circulation through that. The area immediately adjacent to the creek is within the 100-year floodplain. And finally, and probably most importantly, the current zoning on that site was created by a proposition, and preliminarily it would appear that were there any change of the type being proposed for a substantial number of housing, that a rezoning via voter approval would be necessary. Next slide. Jolly Hill. We threw this one in simply because it's the largest town-owned site and appears to have some potential. Most of the town-owned sites are just tiny pieces of land that I've been to several that are like literally creek banks and things like that. Whereas this one, even though it is on a slope, it is next to multifamily housing on one side. That's Bennett House there in the bottom left of the slide. And it might have some potential for mixed use. Obviously, it does function as open space right now and an access point of type to the hillside. Jolly Hill, which I would note is privately owned and is owned by the Marinda Heights owner at this time. So we've pretty much just only thrown that in there just to test. Again, this is idea that everything's on the table and to see if there's strong public support for consideration. And I do not believe it has received that support. But again, insofar as town-owned, it was in a decent sized parcel, it was included. Central Commercial Downtown. This is part of our interactive process where we've reached out to the community and said, what are your ideas? And this one, I have to say that upon consideration, after it was nominated by somebody very prominent in the town's decision-making, we looked at it and said, of course, this should be considered. Central Commercial, as we know, it already has a variety of housing, including on the ground floor in certain locations. It encompasses considerable area, and where the cursor just circled, that is a Bank of America site. And this is something where you never know where outreach is going to pay dividends. Somebody who Andy and I were at the Fairfax picnic, and we spoke to an individual that day who called me up and said, hey, I'm involved with the Bank of America in reuse of other sites in other communities. And even though he's not directly involved with this site, he did say that he had understood that this would become available for some future reuse in the not too distant future. So I would definitely put a kind of an exclamation point on consideration of that site. It's not large, but it certainly occupies a key location, and it has the added amenity of a ball field where you could sit on your back deck and catch foul balls. In any event, this is something where we believe that there is a range of units that are possible out there, and depending on what individual future property owners were interested in, and what kind of design standards we come up with, this could be a good fit for the downtown area, and be close to amenities and things like bus service, etc. Okay, this represents, and you know, Andy, I'm going to let you take this over so I give my voice a break and you know it even more intimately than I do.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you for so eloquently speaking through each and every one of our sites. You know the town best from the planning side of the desk, and it certainly helps the whole process to hear your input. Now, what we've done at EMC is we've asked one of our members to look at the list blind and come up with minimum capacity number of units for each of the sites. And at the same time, we've integrated all the numbers that we've discovered through our balancing act tool. And so we've compiled a list here to share with you tonight. And through our community workshop and the information we received back from that, we've assigned popularity according to numbers of people who were encouraging about the site being used. And we were surprised to discover that Town and Country, which is a site that we almost didn't include, has instead become the most popular site to consider. And the average number of units recommended by the public was in fact even higher than the minimum capacity number that our staff member assessed. So the letters here are, they coincide with the number of people who were adding housing units at that location and finding it to be a location worthy of becoming a potential site. As I mentioned, Town and Country received the largest sort of number of votes. And as I mentioned before, I do want to reiterate that housing simulator tool is still open and available to the public, and it's on fairfaxspeaks.com. That's where you'll find the link, and we'll be continuing to accept comments and submittals through the end of the year. We'll then fold all of that information into our next council agenda and packet. We can see here that Tinalima and School Street Plaza, they were the second most popular site to consider. And let's see, Central Commercial Downtown, which encompasses many sites, as Ben just noted. Fairfax Market was next. And I don't need to go through each of these. I'm sure you read it in your staff report, but we can see that the White Hill School portion was in fact the, Marinda Heights. That there's no surprise there. That was the least popular. And with the average number of units desired by the public actually meeting less than the minimum capacity number of units that our staff member came up with. So this was one point where we thought we'd pause and just see if there's any commissioner comments or questions, because it is a lot of information on a single table. And Vice Chair Swift, I see your hand raised.
So curious about the public outreach. So I think somewhere I read that you had about 40 participants.
That's right.
So as far as this table goes, how many participants participated in this process?
Oh, thank you for asking. Yes, because there were 2 attachments to the staff report this evening, and one of them includes comments, and not everybody who submitted a full balancing act Fairfax housing tool map also commented. Some people just voted the number of units per site, and that's what's reflected here in this popularity count. So each of the 4, so this encompasses the full 40.
Okay, so this just reflects 40 participants' view.
Correct.
All right, thanks.
And I would like to mention that in working with some of our staff who were very active with cycles 4 and 5 housing elements in several different communities throughout California, he was shocked and applauded the number of people who had participated through this workshop and carried out through that week. That number 40, he said he had never seen such a number in a charrette or workshop related to a housing element. And I can say I'm proud of you, Fairfax, because we are working in much larger cities where we've only gotten maybe a fourth of this kind of participation. So we are very encouraged. And Commissioner Newton, I saw your hand raised next. And then Commissioner Jansen.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, so I guess I'm a little confused in terms of, are we gonna, do you want us to open up this to all of the questions that we have, or just about the chart and the number of units?
Just about the chart, because it's sort of an unusual grouping of numbers. And just while we're here, I thought we would, especially because we just got a very personal introduction to each of the sites. We do have a little bit more of our presentation. So to go to our full comments, we'd like to complete our presentation.
Okay, thanks.
Unless there's excuse me, Mimi, go ahead. I thought you
No,
were
I was
finished.
just gonna put my hand down if I can.
Okay. Unless there's a specific question about this chart, Andy, why don't you continue with your presentation? And then we can take the bulk of our questions afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Newton. Oh, excuse me, Chair Fregosa. So what kind of units are we anticipating or hopeful for some of these sites? We are looking to make way for missing middle opportunities. And some of these examples are expressed within the odds document that you've been reading, and that's where these images are taken from. Also ADUs or carriage houses. And why does Fairfax need to plan for more housing? We just want to encourage commissioners to help us with messaging and make sure that as you're asked and in discussion with the community, that these are two of the main reasons we want to stay focused on: caring for your neighbors, ensuring fellow residents can continue to live here, and caring for your community so that Fairfax may become a more inclusive town by creating housing opportunities for all community members. So we're just going to repeat again that staff requests that the Planning Commission provide direction on the following: proposed housing sites and preliminary housing number assignments, feedback on the public outreach and engagement, and areas for further investigation relating to the housing and safety elements, along with any safety comments. And I do have the other attachments available to open as they might relate to discussion, questions, and comments. Ben, is there anything you'd like to add before we open it up for questions?
I think because, this is sort of the meat of what we're discussing tonight, we can go into outreach a little bit further as we get past initial commission comments and questions about the housing sites. We sort of felt like that would be a focus of your commission and wanted to make sure we afforded adequate time to do that. And then we could kind of discuss where we're at with outreach and some of the other topics we're going to get to tonight.
Ben, I was going to say through the chair, are we opening for, we do have some members of the public, about half a dozen who are here. Are we bringing them in at some point? What do you suggest? This is the end of your presentation unless we have specific questions, and now we're moving into these final comments that you asked from commissioners on what are our thoughts and any other ideas. But at what point then do we allow participation from our attendees?
That's a very good question. And actually, I should probably restate that if we have questions from the commission about these sites, probably the best thing to do would be to entertain those first.
We would do those first.
And then open it up to any public comment, and then circle back to the commission for comments they may have on this topic. So basically have a three-part with the initial steps being if there are commission questions about these sites.
Okay. How does the commission feel about just each of us taking maybe 2 minutes and providing either comments or questions about the presentation we have? And can you flash your last slide, Andy, I think you had it about what it is you're asking from the commission this evening. Okay, so if we could leave this up for a minute, and commissioners in any order that you would like to start, comments on the proposed sites, the number of assignments, you mean housing units? That's difficult to comment on. Feedback on the public outreach, areas for further investigation. Let's start with proposed housing sites and any preliminary comments that we have. Let's limit it to that right now. And Commissioner Swift, why don't we just start with you?
So
If that's okay.
I had a question on the process we're going through.
Okay.
We have other parts of the staff report that talk about the outreach. And I think there were some things there on the safety element. So a couple questions. One, is there going to be further staff report tonight addressing those other issues that are in the staff report? And then I'm not prepared to provide comments on the housing aspect until we hear from public comment. So I'm a little confused as to, are we breaking up the staff report and what you want from us into pieces and going through each piece with our questions and public comments and coming back and doing the next part of the staff report, or are we doing the whole staff report now? I'm a little confused.
I think what I'd like to do right now, if that's okay with the rest of the commissioners, is any comments or questions on the proposed sites before, while those are fresh in our mind. Should we include all of them? Do you not want them all in? Is there one you refuse to consider? Do you think it's a good idea? The proposed sites, just any general comments. And then we'll take these one at a time. The next item is feedback on public outreach and engagement.
Okay,
After that, we talk about the safety element. So we'll take these one by one.
Okay, so then I would think that we would want public comments before it comes back to us on the table, no? Or you want our comments now before?
If you have a comment or a question, please make it now. And if you don't, we'll go to the next commissioner. And if none of us have comments or questions, we'll go on to the next topic, which is feedback on public outreach and engagement. And we'll take those one at a time.
Okay, so
just so that we're all talking about one topic at one time.
Okay, so my concerns with some of the sites and the description of them, we're looking at potentially, the downtown commercial areas. And what I'm seeing is, and there's been no kind of discussion of it, deletion of parking areas that are now used to benefit our commercial areas. So one of the areas was the parking lot to the west of the Java Hut, and other areas where we've got areas that are fully utilized for parking. And my concern is we're taking, the potential to take away needed parking. So I think especially when we get in the downtown area where we already hear from business owners that there is a lack of parking, that we need to be cognizant of the need for our business community and that it supports the town, and to make sure that we address parking loss in that area. So that's one of the concerns that I have with these areas. The other area goes back to, and I know you said put everything on the table, just the feasibility of some of these sites and the numbers that the minimum capacity number of units that are listed are concerning at this point in time.
Okay,
And
so
the
good. That's
B of A
exactly the type of comment that I was suggesting we make.
And the B of A building has closed, so
I'm sorry, has what?
closed. The B of A
they
building.
closed. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay, Commissioner Jensen, do you have any comments or questions on the proposed sites?
Yes, I do. So I think in general, I believe all the sites that been brought forward, I can see there is potential in there, but they're very different, as we noticed, like not only in volume, but also in what you can do within them. Based on the responses, and I think also in your numbers, it's obvious that the more downtown, the more urban sites have more potential. But then at the same time, and I'm gonna mirror Commissioner Swift's concern, and you see that in the comments, that of course is challenging the parking capacity, and the comments bring that out too. So that's always a difficult thing with any type of development in the urban context, but I think that needs to be resolved site by site. So I think what staff's put together and proposed, I think each and all of them to me seem to have a potential. So I think that's a very good summary of potential within Fairfax.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Kelly?
Yes, thank you.
Any comments or questions on the sites?
I do. Can you hear me? Am I still muted?
I hear you.
Okay, great. I have a couple general comments about the chart itself. I think that it would be telling for us, the popularity is interesting. I think it would be telling for us to know whether have you done any initial assessment or evaluation of CEQA assessments on any of these sites, and understanding what the challenges for each of these sites might be with CEQA process. It would be interesting for me to know at a glance which of these sites would require rezoning. Would also be telling. And then just so I could keep track, I know Ben, you were very distinct about each one, about whether or not the owner was engaged and interested, but just that as a yes, no would probably be very telling for us also to evaluate the sites. And then I have just a question about that. It seems that we are able to count sites to get up to that 490 that the owners might not even want to have their property considered. Is that true?
The only site that we don't know what the owner's position is would be the Kingdom Hall site. With the remainder of the sites, I acknowledge that the east side and west side commercial were derived from former housing elements, and there's some procedural aspects with that, making sure that since they weren't developed, we would have to sort of sweeten the pot a little bit, zoning wise or some other way, design standards, for example, to entice people if they were interested to develop. But in general, the vast majority of these sites, the owner is either definitely interested or not opposed.
So the east side commercial strip, for instance, is that swath, is that all one owner, or is that a number of different owners along that?
Yeah, that's a variety of ownerships. In fact,
so
you can look at the pattern of structures on there, and pretty much as you get to different structures, you're getting to different ownership.
So I guess that's the one that just caught my eye, that it seems odd that we'd be able to say, oh yeah, we can count 25 houses or 25 housing units along this swath, when is there an assurance that any of that could actually even come to pass?
So remember, we're not assuring development. We are assuring that the zoning is available for
Yeah.
development should the owners move forward.
Yeah, that's a key distinction.
I understand.
Is that we're not developing anything. We're planning for the potential future development for housing. In terms of your question about CEQA, we might as well get into that a little bit right now.
Really briefly, though, because that's a quagmire, please.
Yes, exactly. Very briefly. This conversation is scheduled to go to the town council in January. We don't have a specific meeting date, but the council will be taking the lead on that conversation. And so we will be obviously integrating some environmental review as part of this housing element going forward, and it will address all of the sites. And that's probably as much as we should discuss that until we get a little bit further along in terms of the town council's discussion and direction on that topic.
I appreciate that response. Thank you.
I just had a couple more questions if I could.
Sure.
They're more specific. The St. Rita's site, it seems that it would actually block access to the school. Is there some way that that's thought through?
Yeah, I mean, again, the question is, how granular do we go at this stage? Insofar as the school is a viable school at this point, access would need to be factored into any future development plans for the remainder of the site.
Okay. And you mentioned the bridge at the Town and Country Club, but that wouldn't be the town's responsibility in any way, would it?
Pretty unlikely, given the expense
Right.
associated.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Brett. Former Chair Newton, any comments or questions on the chart?
Yeah, thank you. A couple. First off, I really appreciate the visual presentation in this PowerPoint when you actually go to each of the specific sites. And you have the visual image of where it is on the map, accompanied by the number of units that the town staff are talking about for each of the sites. And if we really want to get into giving our feedback more specifically, I would recommend we use those slides and go through them one at a time. But if we're focused on questions, I want to clarify a couple things that I heard during this part of the presentation. One being with respect to the wall property, I thought that you said that under SB9, Ben, you anticipated they could potentially have 30 units on that property. Did I hear you right?
No, that's a pre-SB9 analysis. That what we're looking at is under the state's laws pertaining to accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units, that somebody who came in with the 10-lot land division with just a primary residence, that future property owners could, at their sole discretion, elect to develop an accessory dwelling unit and a junior accessory dwelling unit on those sites. And that's what would bring that number up to 30. That's independent of consideration for SB9 future developability.
Okay, and yet I thought that I saw that 20 was the number that you were associating with it. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's kind of a middle ground because what we're seeing the trend with accessory dwelling units is to just say that if you're going to talk about a new house, you're probably looking at an accessory dwelling unit at some point. I don't know if the town would be opposed to that at all. And I don't think we'd have a lot to say if they decided to do it. So, the 10 without an ADU, 30 with an ADU and a JADU, 20 being the midpoint on that.
Okay, and the way I understand it, you identified the specific income capacities for the units, right, on the table that's in the packet.
Yes.
And in this one, I just need an explanation. It says 10 at moderate income, 10 at above moderate income, total 20. So the 10 would be the moderate income level, would be the ADUs, and the 10 at above moderate income capacity would be the other 10 normal buildings, is what you're talking about, right?
Correct. The primary residences.
And so is above moderate income capacity without a ceiling on its range?
Correct. That's basically another moniker for market rate.
Does that go into the RENA table?
Absolutely. Yeah. About 200 of the 490 would be market rate, or AKA above moderate.
So no income limit at all?
Correct.
No price limit at all? Not affordable in any way, shape, or form at all? Is that right?
Correct.
But the
Adam
market will
Smith's
bear.
invisible hand would set the market.
Okay, I just want to be clear, because I'd like to remind everybody that we exceeded our RENA numbers in the last round for the lower income units, right?
Yes.
And did the fact that we exceeded the number ever become credited to our account, as it were?
It's in process. The state has an extremely complex way to determine when and how they credit you. I have to say, depending on whether it's a building permit or final inspection, and those criteria change. So it's kind of a moving goalpost. It's one of the issues we often have with the state.
Okay. The other question I have is specifically with respect to Jolly Hill as one of the properties. And I don't know if you can go back to the Jolly Hill slide just for a moment, Andy, or whoever's controlling the slides. But I thought you said, and I believe, that the town of Fairfax owned this property. And then you said the owner of Miranda Heights owns Jolly Hill. And I think you meant the top part of the properties. This is town-owned property, correct?
Yes, and thank you for requesting that clarification. I mean, they both occupy a portion of Jolly Hill. The majority of the area of what is known as Jolly Hill is owned by the owner of Miranda Heights, aka the Wall property. This is a Chevron. Oh, here we go. Okay, there. Yeah, so exactly right at the very bottom, that little chevron, that's the Jolly Hill site. And then obviously that only goes partway up that grassy slope that everybody can see from downtown. And then when you get to where the tree line is, where the tree line starts, that's near the crest of the first knoll, and then you kind of go flat, and then it continues to climb up to the ultimate ridge line at the edge of the Miranda Heights property. So that's all Jolly Hill.
All right. And the reason why Jolly Hill is not being considered is it is open space, and it is town-owned open space, correct? And even though we haven't zoned it as open space, we probably should, unless, everybody decides that it's a good site. I mean, there are sites that are identified in the open space element, and they include more than just Jolly Hill. But for Jolly Hill, it's town-owned, and that makes it slightly different, which is the fact that the Wall property is listed in the open space element. I think Town and Country is listed in the open space element. And I'm just wanting to clarify that the reason why you've kind of taken Jolly Hill off the table, according to the Jolly Hill slide, is because it's town-owned open space. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. There has been, it's been shown for discussion purposes, but because we have received zero direction from your commission or the council or other affiliated committees and groups that we should explore that. We're not exploring it at this time, but it's simply noted as, again, there's been conversations about use of town-owned sites for housing, and the vast majority, I would say virtually all of them, have extreme limitations on developability, inherent land use restrictions, slope, environmental constraints. This one is much less constrained, and it's quite a bit larger than any other town-owned site, which is, this is open space, but as you can see, there's a couple trails on it. That's basically its use.
Okay. Well, I'm very familiar with it, but I want to make sure that the public is, fully informed before we open for public comment. And I guess my next question is for Andy or Ben, in terms of how this table and these numbers were generated. Was this totally based on crowdsourcing from the website, or was there an independent analysis by staff and the consultant regarding some of the research you guys did on things like the single egress and ingress streets and other information and evaluations beyond just the crowdsourcing through the website? And if so, could you explain that to me?
Yeah, there have been a variety, as you can see from this table, and we might need to zoom that in a little bit. One of the things we looked at was density. As you're probably aware, the town does not have density limits contained in its development regulations, which, as we know from the previous conversations about missing middle housing, that the question isn't so much density, it's overall size. That you can take, for example, a residential scale house and either have one family there or four families there. And that's a discussion that we could bring forward a little bit further tonight. So when we're looking at density on these sites, we're considering density as a rough proxy for affordability. Other things being relatively equal, if you have a higher density on a site, it will be more affordable. And Andy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's also consistent with the way the state HCD looks at how we approach meeting our affordability and indeed our fair housing goals, that as you get into lower density, it becomes less affordable and represents more of a barrier for people to live and rent or purchase. So that's one of the factors. Another factor, obviously, was property owner input. This gets back to a prior question about conversations with property owners. Obviously, we're starting in some cases with interest that the property owners have expressed, and then taking those very preliminary numbers to groups like your commission, to the public. One of the things that we've done with the 47 people that have participated is they've basically come up with a housing plan. And that's one of the charges that we've had. So that's why, even though the overall numbers may not be great, the fact that there's 47 different people who are giving us their opinion on how you achieve 490 units or more. And I would point out that table shows that the average number of units that the public came up with was actually considerably more than 490 for the overall town, which is good from a policymaker and an advisor and decision maker standpoint, because it says, hey, we've got people who are willing to invest their time in this process, come up with a somewhat viable solution, and then let your group, your commission, and the town council kind of take it from there based on information and points of view that you have.
Well, so I guess the answer to my question is you looked at the density and you crowdsourced a lot of preferences from 47 people on the web. And I guess I'm just curious about the map regarding the ingress and egress, because that to me was, really important element of the work we were doing. I mean, I think we talked at our last meeting, I don't want to get into my comments, but we talked about the safety element being the driver for the housing element. So I just wanted to understand better how you guys came up with these numbers. And I didn't hear in that answer that you, what I heard was we got all this data and we looked at the density and we made assumptions about affordability based on density. In my experience in Fairfax, even in the downtown, densest areas, you've got crazy unaffordable rents. And so we still don't have any viable means of ensuring that we're getting affordable housing by size. So I'm really curious about how you guys came up with these numbers. So
Yeah.
If I
Yeah.
may, Ben.
Go ahead, Andy.
Yes. So when we're looking at this preliminary list, the idea is that we keep ourselves open to discussion for by assigning almost every site at that 20 unit per acre density. Then what that enables us is preparation for discussion of policies, and it keeps us open to some policies that can also be a magnet for funding, for there to be deed restricted 100% affordable units. And so before we start talking about policy, what we want to do is just make sure that we don't preclude ourselves from the kinds of policies that are out there that will do exactly what you're talking about, Mimi, that it goes beyond just an assumption that there will be a certain amount of affordability according to site, but instead we can actually attract investment in that kind of affordability. So that's our goal with this preliminary list. And just a reminder to all of us also is that we need this preliminary list so that we can understand how to kick off the environmental review, so that that can be working in tandem with us having deeper dives into the policy questions.
All right, I'm just going to ask 2 more questions. The lawyers are not supposed to say how many more questions they have, but I'm just going to try and stick to it. Could we at this stage come up with imaginative ways to rezone properties in Fairfax in order to truly establish as much built-in affordability as possible? And in a lot of the comments that I see in the materials that we got with the packet, there are ideas about tiny homes. And when you look at those maps of the sites up close, you see a lot of parking. And we've already discussed how I think many of us feel that parking is a critical issue in this town. We heard it from Cindy this evening, and Commissioner Jansen mentioned it at our last meeting. And, there's been a suggestion for the safety element that we engage in a full-on discussion of parking. And I would like us to think outside the box and be as creative as we possibly can. And I would like to understand if we made overnight tiny home transportable units on parking lots that you see in those images from the satellite views of each of these sites, what the potential might be to create a zone where you had overnight parking with services, including showers and bathrooms and things like that on these sites, and how many tiny homes you could put on a parking area overnight in these spots, because I'm much more interested in the lower income and very low income categories in terms of what I think we're doing backwards, which is trying to fit RENA numbers into our goals as opposed to setting our goals based on what's in our safety element. But if we're going to do it that way, I think I want to err on the side of affordability. And I am, really, I'll just keep harping away at that. So can we be creative in our thinking? All right, that was a question. I saw a thumbs up. And then my last question is, I'm still confused about what you're asking for CEQA. So like you want our input on CEQA, but I don't feel like we've had any discussion about CEQA. So I'm just confused about what the approach really is there.
Can I
Thanks.
try, Ben?
Well, let me just talk briefly about CEQA. Is we had hoped that we would be a little further along with the council's consideration of that topic, and we're not. And so that's why one of the challenges with putting two meetings back to back is that sometimes we say, okay, let's talk a little bit about CEQA, but we're really not at that stage. So I apologize. If we'd known where we were headed with the council meeting last night, we probably would have. But I think, Andy, you had some brief comment too.
Oh, yes. I want to make sure that it's understood that the precursor for any CEQA dialogue and discussion is having our sites list ready to go. So in determining our sites, we're preparing for CEQA. That's why we're here tonight. Council can't say move forward with CEQA until we're feeling pretty confident about our sites inventory list. And if that list is longer than what we end up with in the end, that's great. Much better to go that way than to try to add afterwards. Does that help?
That helped me, Andy. Thank you.
We'll see.
I thought that helped clarify some. Mimi, was that it for your last two questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair Frioso.
Okay. I will take a couple minutes. My comments are that I'll say this for the commission, but I think the public also needs to hear it. We're in the very early stages here. We're talking about sites where something might be able to be developed. We have no designs, we have no measurements, there are no drawings to show which way the traffic is going to go. That needs to come at a later time. The only thing we're doing here is identifying large enough sites for development, sites, as staff said, that aren't a fire trap, aren't going to fall off the edge of the mountain, won't float away in the creek. We're in those very early stages, and until we have clearer ideas about what the development options would be, for instance, if Town and Country gets developed, the CEQA we do for the housing element will not cover the Town and Country Club development. They will need their own larger scale CEQA. So we shouldn't get tied up in that right now. But again, I think it might be helpful, though your materials are very good, they're getting clearer and clearer. 2 or 3 comments I have on the presentation materials. First of all, I love the slide deck you showed us tonight with the opportunity sites. The chart you gave us, first of all, I can't even see it. With or without my glasses on, I can't see it. I know it's a nifty chart because it's got all that information on one page, but I would like to ensure that when that comes back to us again, that we get that the slide deck that you showed us that has a map, that has all the specifics about the site. Everything that's on the table and more should be on the individual opportunity site pages. Each one should have a page that would help us review it. And then I think that your materials, it might be helpful to clarify, because people are asking, wow, sure, we can identify 1,000 units here and there around town, but who's going to build them? What if they never get built? I don't think people fully understand that we don't have to build them. I think it would be helpful if it were more clear for people that we're only looking at potential for building something. There's no application, there's no design. We're just identifying sites and appropriate and safe locations. The other thing is, there was an article, a letter to the editor in the IJ last week, where a gentleman was saying he was really upset because state law in cities now were requiring people to split their parcels up and create 2 units instead of 1. There's clearly a misunderstanding of what it is that the town is trying to do. The town, as we said, won't be building anything. This is a zoning game, so to speak. The other thing is, I very much appreciate all the sites that you have brought forward, and I do believe they should all be included. But I do think it would be much easier to review them. And the maps are good. It shows where they all are on a map. But once we had those individual pages, that will be much easier for us to comment on as we move forward with more details on potential densities or potential unit types. Those are my comments on the materials. My comment in terms of the philosophy and goal, there you had a sentence about providing housing opportunities for all members of the community, which is a little too generic for me. I would like to have something more like providing our goal, our philosophy being to provide a diversity of housing types and sizes for all sectors and all incomes of the population. And somewhere we need the word equitable, equitably affordable. So I don't want to wordsmith the paragraph, but I think you get my point that in our goal and objective, we need to be, as Mimi was saying, we need to look for more affordability, more equitably available housing, and including tiny homes and cottages. I think fair housing is not really addressed, and it ties to affordability in some instances. Particularly, I would like to see something about substandard housing conditions being placed under fair housing requirements. I find that people get away with all manner of disastrous housing without being called to the mat for it. And then, so those are my comments. And the question I have for you, Ben, is in moving forward, will the opportunity site information come back to us with more detail at a later date once it goes? Is something like this going to council at their next meeting? And then it will come back to us. And then my other question is, the whole middle housing concept is really magnificent because it addresses a lot of what Mimi and I were talking about in terms of variety of housing truly for everyone in the community. And the idea that we're scaling down, that it was very well put in the staff report that there should be focus not just on what is the biggest freaking house we can build, but what is the smallest house? What are the small houses that we could build? So that it's not just a focus on, yeah, you can go up to 5,000 square, well, 3,500 square feet at this point. So can you tell me then briefly, Ben, what the plan is to bring back this housing opportunity information to the Planning Commission, and when might that be?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair Fregoso. And I think, Andy, you can probably speak a little bit more to milestones. My understanding is that as we go into this discussion further, we will obviously be exploring issues and subjects relating to these development sites. Because as Andy said, there are policies and programs that we would need to put into place, particularly to achieve affordable housing and inclusionary housing goals. And Anna, if you had anything to add to that.
Yes.
Just to clarify, when you say policies and programs, are you referring to those written policies and programs that we had in our current housing element? Develop housing for all people, create safe, okay. So we will go back to that. Okay.
And more.
Andy,
And more.
Andy was going to respond.
Oh, I was just gonna say and more. We'll be looking at the policies that have been placed in the past. We'll be analyzing those. We'll be bringing new ones and into the discussion, and also some opportunities, as I mentioned before, to attract investment in the future construction. So that's our, and then I also want to address what Commissioner Kelly brought up about due diligence. So we will absolutely be looking at each of these sites and considering feasibility, particularly for those sites that have been used in former cycles. There is definitely a higher threshold for understanding the viability for these sites into the future, which is why it's important to, at this point, consider more numbers as potential housing sites than what is minimum necessary.
Exactly, because things change. I mean, look at B of A. Who would have thought B of A would close down? Who would have thought we'd get rid of that nasty gas station that's now the barbecue joint? One other question, if you have a brief answer, this may not be the time, it may come at a later meeting. I'm trying to visualize the odds and the middle housing concept, the form-based development standards, and how those will be meshed with this verbal policies and programs of the housing element and the opportunity sites. So I guess that is down the road, right? And then we'll be talking about that.
Yeah, when you started mentioning that, I looked at Andy and I saw this big grin on his face, because we've been discussing this at length and exactly on that topic, the need to integrate that, where we're going to go with that. We know that it is an important aspect of how we proceed with this housing element. It's challenging. We've got this really big toolkit, and we need to figure out some way to whittle it down and make it relate to these housing opportunity sites. We're looking at various options for doing so, but I can say going into the spring, and we've already started to have those discussions, that we are looking at how to approach that. One of the primary or foremost concerns is dealing with the state's new housing laws, Senate Bill 9, and the duplex, the lot split in duplexes. And I could say I've already initiated outreach with Opticos. I'm not sure we'll end up going there with them, but we definitely understand that that is a work program that we need to undertake, both with the odds subcommittee at the Planning Commission level and ultimately as we go forward with the housing element.
I'm glad you mentioned the subcommittee because that's a good place to take that type of thinking. And I would very much like to be involved in those discussions moving forward. But moving forward, maybe the other items on the comments that you wanted from us today were comments about the public outreach and the comments made and about CEQA. I think we have determined that really there's nothing to talk about CEQA right now, that we don't have to go around the table and comment on CEQA. I don't think that would be a fruitful discussion at this time. And then we could talk about people's comments about the public input, but maybe this is a good time to open it up for public comments. And then we can come back afterwards to the Planning Commission.
If Chair, if I could just mention that we have
Yes.
2 commissioners that have had their hands up, or one.
I'm
Commissioner
sorry, I can't.
Danson has had his hands up.
Okay.
And then I have some more comments or questions after that, but he has had his hand up.
Oh, okay.
So I just wanted.
I apologize for that. I saw your hand go up when you started talking, but I realized I have to go into participants and look at hands. Is that the only way to do it, to go into the participant list and look at who has their hands up?
Well, one of the things we could probably task our Zoom master with is to remind the chair, because I think a lot of times when you're involved with running the meeting, it's hard to, pull up the participant list and the panelist.
I would appreciate that very much,
Okay.
Tamala, at least for tonight. If there's a hand up, please let me know because I'm obviously not catching them. I'm sorry, Cindy, did you make your comment?
No, let me go after Commissioner Jansen because his hand's probably getting tired.
Robert, you can put your hand down and speak. Thank you. I'm sorry to keep you waiting.
No, it's okay. I have a number of things to talk about, but I believe that I agree, Chair, that we should open it to the public first before we get into the wee hours. I think we should do that now. See if there are public comments.
And then we'll come right back to you.
Later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let me just go ahead and ask my question.
Okay.
And it goes back to comments that ABAG had mentioned about sites that were previously in a housing element that weren't built on, and that they would be looking at those more seriously if they remain on the next housing element. So I don't think this is necessarily just an exercise in, kind of zoning and they will come. That it's just not a numbers game. So I just wanted to clarify that they would be looking at places that we have had previously that weren't built.
And
Also,
Cindy, in fact, they're requiring an assessment of if you've had something on your list for a long time, they're asking you to kind of do a fresh assessment of that site.
and if we could get the PowerPoint from tonight, perhaps attached to sent to us, but also maybe just on the Planning Commission agenda and package for
That would be a
tonight,
great
that would
idea.
be helpful. And then a question, when you mentioned CEQA, if you're starting the CEQA process on what is here tonight as kind of a maximum, or the CEQA process would start after this gets more refined? I'm a little confused on that, because that kind of impacts also. I mean, I have concerns about capacity listed on a lot of these sites as well. So can you kind of restate the CEQA process as to how you start looking at CEQA, considering the fact that we have this table in front of us? Thank you.
Was that a question for Ben?
Or I could take it, Ben, if you'd like.
Andy, go for it.
Sure. Our CEQA team here at EMC will be going through our checklist and taking a look at this number of sites. I would recommend that generally we'll be looking at more the maximum, because we definitely wouldn't want to preclude a potential development into the future if it were to be allowed by right, for instance. It's in the community's best interest for us to consider the possibility of the maximum number of units. Now, I also have to say that I am not the CEQA expert on my team, so I don't want to be giving prescriptive analysis, but in working with our team, that's some of the early discussions that we've had, that generally so we would rather in our analysis go with the maximum so that we don't preclude one site over another site. It's definitely in the community's best interest for us to enable as much flexibility in our eventual plan as possible, so that there doesn't, our goal is to make it so that Ben doesn't have to do a mid-cycle review if there are sites that get developed and maybe don't don't include the amount of affordability levels of units that we are assessing and intending for these sites. Does that help, Commissioner Swift? Is there a follow-on question?
No, that helps for now.
Actually, Cindy, it is a process that gets started later. Once the programs and policies are developed in coordination with the potential opportunities out there. So it's a little premature.
But that's one of the reasons why we're taking to the commission this discussion about the sites and some of these preliminary options, so that we can get the commission's reaction. And if there's something that really struck, for example, a consensus of the commission as problematic about a particular site, we would want to make sure to transmit that forward to the town council for their discussion and direction. Another thing is, let's just use Jolly Hill as a surrogate, because we're not really hearing any direction from your commission regarding, we should really jump on that site for housing consideration. We haven't heard it from the public. So that site is basically static in our analysis, and we would reflect that in what we go forward.
So actually, Ben, being the only site that's owned by the town, I mean, people say, oh, the town should buy the Town and Country Club, Fairfax should buy property and develop. Fairfax has no resources to buy property. The fact that the town owns something would make me think we own it. The only way to build affordable housing in this market is if you don't have to buy the land. It's the only way to build affordable housing. Or if you get money from somewhere to buy the land or a land donation. So that's why I would not take it off.
But to your part, Ben, about this, I'm not prepared to give you input on each of these sites as to the numbers. I mean, I think the minimum capacity for some of these is too high, but that would get, I'm not going to be prepared tonight to give you that input. So if you need something like that, we need a little bit more, from my perspective, specific questions and a time frame to get to that. Because I'm just looking at how you all came up with this table. And I heard comments based on, the more density, the more affordability. But as I said, I'm not prepared to look at each of these and give you input on them tonight.
I don't think that was the point exactly for this evening. The point for this evening is to have we left out a major big chunk of land that's underutilized or fallen apart or an eyesore or a code enforcement problem? Have we missed anything that's out there that we can begin to take a look at it? And so if we could move on, why don't we open it up for public comments? It's after 9 o'clock.
Point of order before we do that, Commissioner Fregoso, I would like after public comment to bring it back to the commissioner for our more involved comments, because I really tried to limit my statements to questions. Thank you.
I appreciate that, as we all did, and we are coming back, and we're starting with Commissioner Jensen after the public comments.
I will say, in looking at the attendees, I do not see, there's only 3 that appear to be, Marin TV is one of the attendees. I only see 3 people and they do not have their hands up. And I just remind them that there is a hand raising function at the bottom of the screen. If you take your cursor and pull it down to the bottom of the screen, you will see the ability to raise your hand. And so if you would like to, well, it looks like we do have a comment from an attendee. So if the chair wishes to recognize Liesl Blash, we can instruct Tamla to unmute her.
Yes, please unmute Liesl Blash for us, Tamala.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, Liesl, you're on.
Yeah, okay, I just wanted to say this is really, again, a good conversation that the town is having about this. I do want to say that I went on the website and submitted feedback on every one of the sites, and I didn't really see it in the comments in the staff report. So I'm not sure if it's just because it came later or if those are the comments you're seeing as the ones that are, the individual feedback for each site. But anyway, I can look at that again. I do hope that we're going to be very creative. I'm looking at the numbers that we're supposed to zone for, and the majority of them are for affordable units. And that's really challenging with the land values that we have now. And I think that both Commissioner Fregoso and Newton have made some really interesting comments about how are we going to make that affordability happen. And like Commissioner Newton, I'm more concerned about affordability than meeting the RENA numbers, but I know we need to do what we need to do. One thing that does concern me is that to even get an affordable housing developer to build somewhere, they need to have at least 50 units to make it pencil out. Unless you're getting a land trust or something to purchase the property or the housing. So, looking at those units and or those properties where you could build at least 50 units and then trying to figure out how could we possibly incentivize or make it affordable for an affordable developer to come in here is a real challenge. So I hope we're going to be really creative about that, because otherwise I think we're just going to get a whole slew of market rate units on these properties. So I think that's kind of important to keep in mind. If we wanted to go with Commissioner Newton's idea about the tiny homes on wheels, we'd have to get an ordinance that allowed tiny homes on wheels as residences in Fairfax. So that's kind of a minor thing, but it's, we're thinking about. And then I keep wondering if there's any way to incentivize or if anybody, to really reach out to people and say, are you willing to sell this land at below market rate, or do you have any commitment to affordable housing? There may be people who want to do that, probably not, but that's my other concern about the Town and Country Club is just that, I'm sure he wants to get a pretty nice amount of money for that. And, how would we benefit from that if there's going to be no affordable housing on it at all? That continues to be, of concern to me. So anyway, I just want to keep saying that I'm hoping we're going to find creative ways to find the way to make that affordable housing happen. That's actually deed restricted affordable housing. And also, I'm not sure if we have enough parking space to actually talk about having air rights. We don't have parking structures per se, but I know San Rafael is looking at selling the air rights above their parking structures to build housing, and that keeps the parking structure, keeps the parking, but also provides housing. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa, for your comments. If I can respond, I have some of the same concerns you mentioned about how does a small town like Fairfax build housing. We don't build housing. Small towns don't build housing. We entice and encourage, and we zone in a way that lets people come in and do something. But what we may want to consider is, one option, Ben, is if it's a large parcel. I've seen several wonderful housing developments where there are market rate units, moderate and market rate on the best piece of the the largest piece of the parcel. And then sometimes the owner or developer will grant a small amount of land where affordable housing can then be built. They could do a donation. Sometimes I've seen property owners outright donate land because they get more out of a tax deductible donation of land than they would from selling that property. So there are numerous ways that nonprofit developers can cut deals. And the other thing we may want to consider, the county is doing some very interesting, small, extremely affordable housing, single room occupancy units, small apartment buildings, 20, under 50 units or 50 units max. And they have federal home key dollars that allow them to come up with some of those development costs. So, it takes research. Look at Victory Village had 10 different funding sources. So no one organization can build housing. Were there any other?
Yes, no, I'm sorry, Chair Fregosa. I'm just going to say I don't see any other hands at this time. If you wanted to close public comment and bring it back to the commission, I do see Robert Yanson's.
Okay, let's do that. Let's bring it back to the commission then for our final comments, and we'll start with Robert.
Thank you, Chair. I first want to go back to discussion that started between a question that Chairman Newton asked. The Jolly Hillside property is, as I said, most locations seem to be viable. To me, that seemed to be viable looking at it. But what I understand is that it is not considered because we did not, or the staff did not receive direction. If that's true, I would like to carry a motion to hereby direct staff to further explore that possibility for many reasons. And one of them is because it is city owned and allows things that otherwise would be impossible.
And it's flat.
And it's mostly flat.
I'm not sure if we need a motion. Ben, do you need a motion from us? Or
no?
A couple of us have now mentioned that we want to keep Jolly Hill on.
Yeah, I think a consensus from the commission. I'd be curious to see what other commissioners' viewpoints are. I would also add that in staff's viewpoint, that could potentially be an access point to further open space if in the fullness of time other parcels or portions of parcels integrated either open space or public access routes, things like that. So, I think it would be an oversimplification to say it's an either or situation, but in any event.
Why don't we then, while we are making our final comments, everyone can comment on Jolly Hill.
Okay, yeah, so it might not work out, that's understood, but don't take it off the table yet, right? Keep it on there. It seems to be viable. And the devil is in the details. So you'll find out later, but don't throw it away yet. That's my recommendation. A second point, very different. So looking at the numbers, looking at the scoring that came out of the input we received on the website and the calculation behind it, that scoring is based exclusively on developing new housing on full or partially empty parking or empty sites. But that is only one of the three possibilities on how to reach numbers. And so I think getting public input on the other two is extremely important. So, if you try to get those 490 numbers, you're trying to populate it on whatever sites are available, you get a good idea, but the other two, of course, may be significant. And the other two I'm talking about is, and something that is mentioned, but is not in the algorithm for assigning those units. The other two are, the first one is the all your duplexes or split duplexes into fourplexes that are scattered around through town. They are not assigned to a specific allocated site. That's a potentially large number, and it would be very informative to understand
Excellent.
how people weigh that. If it happens down the street, somebody does that, versus having another site developed. The third one being that there is an existing capacity that's not registered because those units are not known. I think in some of the prior meetings, I believe it was Commissioner Newton who figured out that there's about 130 Airbnbs in town. So in other words, and whatever the right number is, but there are some. So we know there is a capacity that's unknown simply because it didn't get into the fold. Again, it would be useful to get the public input on how they see that, weighing it against the duplexes in non-allocated sites, weighing it against a larger development of sites. And so that's a concern that I have, that we're measuring something that's very useful and very important, but it's only part of the puzzle. And so maybe there is a way that we could collect that data as well and get input from the public on that.
Now, to your last point, excuse me, go ahead.
No, please. I have one thought, but it's a completely different one. So go ahead.
Well, and the Airbnb topic, I think the town will be exploring that. There's a number of options that are potential out there. I like to say that we have the worst of all worlds right now. We're not collecting any transient occupancy tax, and yet we've taken those units out of the rental housing or some other non-short-term rental housing market. So clearly there's room to improve the town's policies and decisions relating to short-term rentals like that.
Also, to piggyback on Robert's comment, if I may, we also have granny units that are illegal, that have not been, certified in any way. I think there's hundreds of them that, if we had them legalized, that would give us some very affordable units that are already built.
Yeah, Andy and I have discussed this at length. One of the challenges with ADUs is our understanding of how HCD and ABAG would count those is you pretty much have to show what you've been producing to date. One of the good things is when we've been looking at our housing numbers, you'll see that we don't have our missing middles, our SB9 potential, or our ADUs. And so I think the conversation when it comes around to buffer numbers, that this could really help us solidify that requirement when we go to HCD with our draft to say, look, we know that we can get, for example, 100 ADUs just by the rate that we've been processing those, some of which are conversions. Capturing existing ADUs is a tricky problem. I could. It's not a conversation for a lot of discussion tonight, but there's a lot of issues that go into that.
Right.
Okay, we'll leave it at that.
So, no, third point. I have a third point.
Go ahead.
Which is more
You had a
like,
final comment.
sure, which is more like a question. I understood from last question from the public that not all comments are yet in the staff report. So that means up until what point did we see it? When's the cutoff? And I understand it's going to run a little longer. So we're going to have more at the end of the year. Is that correct?
Yes, everything is available both on the website and through the Fairfax housing tool that is available through the website. So there's two different places where you can make comments specific to a site. And both of those will be available through the end of this year, at which point in time we will export. So we exported in preparation for this report on the 7th, on December 7th, in order to be prepared for today's meeting. So similarly, we will export out of both the Fairfax housing tool and the website comment area for the site's inventory analysis, and incorporate that into our next report, most likely to council, but we don't have that all ironed out just yet.
Andy, could you clarify for me, please? Do you want the commissioners to go on and do the simulator?
Absolutely. And
Okay.
we would love for you to be ambassadors, and please tell all your neighbors, friends, family, folks, in the neighborhood, please proselytize this. We need people to come to the site, share their opinions.
That's right. That's right.
As much as possible. There may be something that somebody's witnessing through our analysis tonight, which is just a mid-cycle preliminary check-in on where we're at with public commentary, and decide that they want to gather with their friends and show something that's absolutely the inverse of what we're seeing so far. So please, everyone, let us know your ideas, because we want to be robust.
Anonymously. I would also add that comment that you can keep your personal data anonymous, and I think that would probably be inappropriate at this stage of the conversation.
In fact, it's all anonymous. You would have to try to include your name. So just please don't include your name.
Okay. Robert, was that your last comment?
He signaled yes.
Okay.
Yes, it was. Sorry, I was on mute.
Okay, no problem. Commissioner Kelly, do you have any final comments on either the opportunity sites or the community outreach process as well?
Yes, I think that I guess this would fall into the category of actually the SQL question, and it does. I want to just tag on a couple more items to the viability issue as you described it, Andy. I think the next level of just understanding these sites is understanding how it fits into the fabric of the town. What, simple walkability scores for each site. A larger vision of why one of the housing types would fit well in one of the sites. Just that next level of granularity to understand them and how they would affect the nature of the town, rather than just understanding numbers. I think that's the next step, and I hope to see it. That's it. Thank you.
Excellent comment. I like that. Commissioner Swift?
Yeah.
Would you like to go next?
Yeah, a couple comments to the Commissioner Jansen's comment about Jolly Hill. I think looking at the table, that's 1.5 acres, correct? That we have on there. And I agree with him, if we're putting all these other sites on the list and you're looking at throwing everything on the wall to begin with, then we should add Jolly Hill on there and then have it work through the process. So I agree with him on that. Short-term rentals that we have now, I think short-term rentals is a separate discussion in this town and how we address them, regulate them or don't regulate them. But my question on those would be that I don't see any regulation of short-term rentals affecting our housing element or meeting our requirements there. Am I correct with that?
Likely, the conversion, the reconversion back to longer term housing wouldn't, but the fact that we're not collecting TOT on what's probably at least 100 units might speak to being able to afford housing programs in the future, for example, as an option.
Right.
So
I
that could be-
understand, but it doesn't affect the current process that we're going through.
Right.
Okay.
May
And
not
then-
affect the numbers, but it would affect people's lives
Sure.
potentially. Yeah, just
Potentially. Okay. And then to the comment about looking around the town for duplexes and looking at expanding those, I think one of the comments made earlier and why these sites are where they are is because of the impact of the safety element in a lot of the areas in the neighborhoods. When I looked at, what you all initially brought us, where I remember on Porteous that you had more dense housing at the end of Porteous, that brought up the whole discussion of the safety element and the safety element informing the housing element. So that could be a part of that when we look at a site inventory, that is why these have all come to this version of it. And then a question for the chair, are we now then with our comments looking at the other parts that you wanted feedback on, such as community outreach?
You can at this time.
Because I will wait then because I have comments about the safety element process. So maybe I'll wait till.
Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. So watch the town council meeting last night where there was a presentation to the council on the safety element. And I know I may not have been the only one after our planning commission meeting last month that provided comments to staff on the safety element. So my first question is, I'm assuming that what was brought to the town council didn't include any post-November planning commission comments, correct?
We did review your letter, and thank you for that extremely detailed letter. There was a little bit of a timing issue, but I can say that we are going to be responding to all of the comments and concerns and corrections. For example, I thought your explanation of the role of NRGs and Firewise groups was really helpful, and I thank you for that. So I would guarantee you will see that reflected in the edits we make to the next draft.
Okay, so let me just, because I did 11 pages of comments on that safety element, but I wanted to highlight, since you have it on the agenda, some of for the rest of the planning commission and the public, some of the concerns and key points that I had in looking at the safety element. So one was, since the safety element informs the housing element, I don't think in that draft that we adequately addressed our risk factors and in relation to legislation, recent legislation that we do that. So one of the points was on the road widths. So the 2018 county hazard mitigation plan addressed roadways less than 20 feet wide are a concern. So I really think we need to identify by street the streets that, and name them, the streets that in some part of them are less than 20 feet in width. And one of the comments I made on that was that, you know, we have several Firewise communities that if the town staff didn't have the resources to do that, that we could tap those communities to go out and do measurements and provide that. I think one of the keys is the storm drain master plan that would take us to, you know, something that could mitigate risk for the community. There was some discussion of that last night, that we want to focus on the things that are important to move us forward and not have a safety element that's wordy, but doesn't have a lot of elements that really make a difference for the community in that regard. I was concerned with a lot of the policies in the community preparedness section. I think a council member mentioned this last night as well, that I think some of those policies go against guidance from our public safety agencies. So that concerns me, that when we put things in the safety element that is different from their guidance. And I think that needs to be addressed. And then I don't think we're really addressing all aspects of our community when we talk about community preparedness, because one of the things that I didn't see addressed at all in the safety element was our business community. And what are we doing with our business community to make sure that they're resilient and that they can support us when we have an emergency? There was very little, if anything, in the safety element about addressing our businesses. And there are some business resilience programs out there, and then that should be something that we engage our businesses with. And then, you know, we've got aspects of our community such as churches and schools that I didn't see addressed at all in the safety elements. So those were some of the key points that I had on that. So I just wanted to make mention of that.
Very briefly, just to a couple of your points, the 20-foot road width was adopted as a standard in our SB 9 ordinance, specifically to the effect that those provisions, those state provisions, will not be applicable in portions of the town that are have roadway widths less than 20 feet. And we have undertaken mapping of roadway widths, so we are taking that very seriously and do expect to integrate that into our safety element. And you should be seeing a plan or a diagram that shows that. So yes, we're aware of that. And in conjunction with other recently adopted ordinances, we are doing that effort. So that is an important point, and I appreciate that. In terms of the storm drain master plan, you know, that's one that's pretty well queued up for a public works director. As you know, we have not had a public works director in forever. And we have an interim one who's great. Jonathan is a super smart guy, but he's just interim with the hiring of the new town manager. They are proceeding apace to recruiting and hiring a new public works director. And I agree that a storm drain master plan for a number of reasons is a good idea to proceed forward and not just have policies. And then I appreciate your community preparedness policies. I think that Commissioner Swift, you're more aware than probably just about anybody else in the town how quickly the knowledge base and how things are changing and improving really and the critical role that community-based organizations and groups will play. And so I do appreciate your willingness to lend us your knowledge in tuning this up. That was one of the reasons why we reached out to you specifically, recognizing your expertise in that topic, and will likely continue to do so. As you know, the town council last night was also very directive in terms of tightening up the loop with emergency responder groups and individuals. And we will be doing that with the safety element and making sure that what we have as policies, and specifically the comment came up regarding pedestrian evacuation and things like that. So we want to make sure that the information that we're providing is the latest thinking on what's appropriate. So we're working on all that. And I also appreciate your comments about the business community and things like resiliency. The topic I brought up was post-disaster recovery. We know that things like having a supermarket open as quickly as possible after a disaster is so important to serve the fundamental needs of the community. So, sometimes it's a bandwidth question, and it might point to a program. We also have the emergency group that the council is in the process of forming. And so I think those are people that will be able to really put development of programs on their radar screen, and that we should probably reference that in our safety element, and certainly to the extent that we reflect this latest thinking and this deep knowledge, such as what you have, I think is really helpful.
Thank you, Ben. Mimi, you and I are the two remaining to make our final comments. Do we need a break before we do so, or do you want to push ahead?
I'm happy to take a break if folks want to take a little break.
I can take a little break. Let me see. There's a hand up. Ooh, I see a hand up.
It's mine.
Mimi.
Oh, okay. So if the commissioners, I don't know why I didn't see the other hand before. Okay, they flash off and on. Let's take a 5-minute break. Is that sufficient? And we'll be back, and I'll charge my phone in the meantime. Thank you.
Thanks.
So back at 9:48. We left off with Commissioner Newton making her comments on anything you'd like to make your final comments on, including the opportunity sites or any of the safety element or public outreach information.
Thank you, Commissioner Fregoso, Chair Fregoso. I guess I'll start out with a couple clarifying statements from my perspective. First off, on the Airbnb numbers that Commissioner Jansen was referring to previously, somebody pointed out to me after that meeting that a lot of those Airbnbs that I was finding, searching for short-term rentals online say Fairfax, but they're actually outside of the town limits. And so those numbers, I think everything needs to be ground truthed. And, for the most part, I agree with what you were saying about a whole area within the town, being missing from this analysis. And I'll get into that in a little bit. The other thing I wanted to comment on is Jolly Hill, which I don't think is mostly flat. I think it's a hill. And, I actually think it's premature for us to go through and comment on our reactions to Jolly Hill at this point. And that's because of my concerns about the manner in which we've gone about developing these sites and this list of sites in the first place. And that has to do, in turn, with my concerns about the outreach that we've been doing. And I think that in this town, putting something on a website, regardless of how great the output, or turnout might be in terms of what's been done in other locations, I have a lot of skepticism that 40 participants is what I heard you say, could possibly be a relevant data set for the 7,000 or whatever who live here. And so I have concerns about the outreach because, I think when we were able to meet in real life, we would have seen a significantly different reaction in a public workshop about changes to the housing element in the opportunity sites that we're seeing on a website. And then to Liesel's point about, sort of looking at who's willing to undertake, deed restrictions for affordability that could actually have a lasting impact in the town. I think that the outreach issues become very complex because you run into the NIMBY issue. And I think what Liesel was talking about is more of a YIMBY issue, right? So when you look at something like Jolly Hill, where I've done a lot of work on the open space committee, I know the neighbors there are using that hill. And when you ask them how they feel about turning that into housing, whether it be affordable housing or whatever, you're going to get reactions from the vicinity of the land area that you're looking at, from people who are going to be thinking about how it's going to affect their dog walk every morning, or how it's going to affect their daily life when their backyard is now housing and their open space that we've worked on physically over the years is now going to be turned into something else. And so I'm using Jolly Hill as an example, but I think the same thing will be true for Town and Country, and I think the same thing will be true for Miranda Heights and other opportunity sites that are actually listed in the open space element as high priority open space in the town. And I think there will be a large contingent of people who will not want to put any change on the zoning for Town and Country, and that any 40 data set info about people who think that Town and Country is going to be a panacea for our meeting RENA numbers ought to be regarded with a lot of skepticism, and that we ought to make sure that if we're going to count any properties on that land or any units on that land towards our numbers, that it be the excess numbers, because I do not believe, despite the numbers that you're seeing on the website, that when you actually ask the voters of Fairfax whether that should be an opportunity site and change the recreational zoning that it currently enjoys, that you're not going to get that. So I don't want to put our eggs in the Town and Country basket. If you want to talk about making it a buffer, then maybe that's more realistic. But think about the NIMBY versus YIMBY issue, not in my backyard versus yes in my backyard. And what, some people might have an interest in including deed restrictions on their land out of the goodness of their hearts. And I do not think we should underestimate the goodness of the hearts of Fairfaxians. And I would actually want to see us do outreach regarding who's interested in putting a deed restriction on their single family home, as long as that single family home is in the entire area that your mapping indicated would have more than one ingress or egress. And so we would actually find out who in this town has that kind of desire to put their property money where their mouths are, in the sense of saying, yeah, I would deed restrict my house and require that it be affordable if it was to be a three units on my land or whatever. And I want to see us, I appreciate the crowdsourcing. I really do. I think the crowdsourcing is an excellent way of getting a pulse of a certain segment of the town. But I also want to see us use professional analysis that looks at the safety element. And again, I want to hammer home the idea that we put the cart before the horse. And what we need to be doing is looking at the egress issues, the parking issues, the safety element issues, and making our decisions about where the appropriate place is to allow these units based on what our conclusions are about the safety of the areas that we're choosing. And, so I want us to see a more comprehensive approach that, does this in the right way, in the sense that we take the things sequentially as opposed to goal-oriented. We're going to get to 490. How are we going to slice this pie to get to 490? I would so much prefer to see us say, where can we put the units in a way that's going to allow for the continued safety of the residents? I mean, we've heard from the public in previous meetings that, oh, there's no way you can do this, period. But I don't like making these conclusory decisions about things without having the necessary information. And I think that the use of the professional analysis of things like the single ingress and egress and how that rules places out, and then what's left, right? What areas are left? Could we do as Commissioner Jansen was suggesting, which is look at things like existing ADUs, the ability to make duplexes or quadplexes on those areas where you actually have more ingress and egress. And I also think we need to look at, despite all the rain lately, we need to look at services. We need to look at, the capacity of the town physically to absorb more residents. And that has to be taken into account. So I still want us to be really creative in terms of the sites and the number of sites that you guys have listed for each house. For each number of units for each opportunity site. Again, I feel like I will do a lot better job if you have those slides up and I can sort of think about it. And I will go on and go onto the website and as Norma suggested she would, and fill those out myself. But I feel like some areas are missing. I think that the areas for further investigation for you guys are using the maps that you've already created to identify the areas that would be the least unsafe. Least unsafe. Let me just see. I do think finding the path towards legalization of the units is definitely a critical thing for us to be thinking about in terms of what's already there that's not being counted. And I'm guilty of getting on my soapbox and saying everybody should get their comments on the safety element in and their top priorities for the safety element into you guys. And yet I've been a little busy and I haven't done it. And it's not a good time of year for me to do that, but I'm going to continue to do it. And Ben, just so you know, I was listening to the town council meeting last night and I will try to get those comments the way Cindy did in like line by line comments that I have as soon as possible. Let me see, the other, I guess that might be it. Let me just double check here. Yeah, okay, that's it. Thanks.
Those comments were super helpful. And obviously there was quite a bit of it. And, we understand there's limitations with what we've done. Nobody anticipated that we were going to be going to a virtual and web-based approach. And we know that obviously 40 people don't speak for, like you said, thousands of people. And we can anticipate that. One of the things that I've already thought also is this notion of the town and country requiring a vote of the people on a zone change and how that affects the feasibility of using that for any substantial housing numbers. But nonetheless, we've done and continue to do extensive outreach, even though a lot of these meetings have been virtual, actually virtually all of them. But, there's been a dozen or 24 of them to date. And we get, we've been to a farmer's market, we've been to the town picnic. I mean, we've really put in an exhaustive effort to do outreach under very difficult circumstances. We're continuing to do so. I could do a little segue here into the fact that one of our major challenges from the state, if requested, Andy can provide the substantial challenges that other jurisdictions have faced with their housing elements in Southern California to date. But we know that one of our tasks is to meaningfully reach out and affirmatively further fair housing and incorporate heretofore marginalized groups and individuals into our process, and we are doing so. We have something oriented specifically for renters and Spanish-speaking individuals on tap. We also will be doing further focus groups for Spanish-speaking individuals. So, it's nothing's going to be optimal. You're always going to be making some decisions where you have to leave off and where you have to make certain assumptions. I will say that with the thousands of site visits and hundreds of registered people, that I would put that up against a large vocal group of people at a single town council meeting and say that we are getting valid data that might reflect much more than what you might get with just that group of people. So, it's at some point, we can call it crowdsourcing, but when the numbers don't necessarily lie. I agree that 40 is not a very big sample size, but, hundreds and hundreds of people participating in our surveys and polls and preferences and things like that. I think at some point, I think that is something that decision makers and advisors can and should use. And, in point of fact, in today's climate, I'm not sure how much other choice we have. So, beyond that, thank you for continuing to provide those comments and things that you may want to include regarding the safety element will certainly be viewed and integrated. And, the Jolly Hill is sort of a microcosm of every site in town. And you mentioned it, that Town and Country and some of the other sites, especially ones that have previously been identified as priorities for open space. And as somebody who participated on that group for a long time, that, one of the fundamental challenges is that those sites are privately owned. And when they get sold, there's a pretty hefty price tag on that, and that people come in with expectations based on the current zoning. So, all those go into factors about whether things end up as open space. At the end of the day, we do have a regional housing allocation number, and we have to do our best from a staff standpoint anyway to try to comport our activities in that direction. And I don't think anybody considers that a comfortable process.
Ben, I totally agree with Commissioner Newton's comments about outreach and, you know, the 47 comments on the web. And I don't think, you know, we're reaching the vast majority of the community. I noticed that you're doing community outreach in person to renters coming up. And I will just say it again, you know, and you may disagree with me, but I think having community neighborhood-based meetings would give you a deeper data set on things like the sites and getting questions answered, and the whole process than what we've done to date with, you know, the online process. So I just wanted to reiterate that and agree with Commissioner Newton's comments. Thank you.
You're mute, Norma.
Thank you. I just said I'd like to finish my comments as well. You know, interestingly, I think both commissioners make some good points. Sure, 40 people is not enough, but it's 40 people who probably have never come to a meeting. How is that worse than the same 40 people who always come to the meeting? How is that worse than, you know, other comments that, so I'm not saying it's enough. I'm saying that the outreach we have been doing is more extensive than it appears to be, and that I think it's reaching more people that wouldn't normally come to a planning commission meeting or a council meeting. So there's that to consider. And the other thing I would say is that, Ben, one thing that I don't want to talk about tonight, but I'd like to talk about it in the near future, are the outdoor eating places that we've set up. Everybody loves those. They're really cool, but some people have concerns. For instance, can you take up your sidewalk space and your neighbor's sidewalk space? Or if you do that, if you're the one who has the money to build the space, and then your neighbor doesn't, they don't get to take it, you know, they can't sit there at that table. I have some issues around that. Are we going to leave those up? I'd like to have that discussion with the planning commission. Just it could be an informal commission discussion, and I'd like to have that before it comes to us in a staff report where the council gives us an hour to review it and comment, and then send it off to them and they make the decision about what happens with that, because it's an integral part, as some people have mentioned already tonight, in terms of looking at the uses of downtown parking lots and parking spaces on the street. Frankly, I think that the bicycle racks were misplaced on Broadway. Is that Broadway, the big street? And that instead of having the outdoor seating on Bolinas, it should have been on Broadway, because it's a much wider street. And the bikes could have been in so many other places. Hey, I love them. They're really nice, but the rubber's going to hit the road pretty soon here. And I would like to have that on the agenda at some point for the Planning Commission to discuss.
Noted. Thank you.
And that being said, I think everyone has given you comments. Do you have sufficient feedback from us about, obviously not CEQA? There's more questions than feedback on CEQA because we're not quite there yet. But in terms of the opportunity sites, and obviously you have a wealth of information on the safety elements and procedures. Cindy did make a good a really good idea. I'm not sure how that would happen in terms of how to address. There's one thing about addressing an owner of an opportunity site, but a way of addressing the immediate neighborhood around an opportunity site. That might be something we could talk about, or it could be an invite, a special group invite for people of opportunity sites. And so with that, Ben, do you have what you need on this item?
Yeah, I think we had a number of topics that we were talking about, and yet I think it's filtered through, even though we've been focusing on the sites themselves, things like the public outreach and engagement. Obviously we devoted some space to the results and what we're doing and continue to do. And I think we've gotten some useful feedback from your commission on that topic. So unless the commission wants to further discuss that, the safety element, I could.
That is work in progress.
It is work in progress, and Commissioner Swift listened in on the meeting, and she did a pretty good encapsulation, actually, of the issues that remain. I thought one of the key report outs that are things that I came up, and it was really something that we hadn't focused on, is the discussion of emergency notification. Is that there was some council support for revisiting the use of cell towers, not 5G, none of this, ground level EMF bathing type of facilities, but the notion that, how we let the citizenry know when every minute counts, sometimes every second counts, and you've got a siren that you go 2 curves up Cascade and you can't hear it anymore. And if you're in the west part of the town, you can't hear it at all. And I know at least one council member who had a fire at her complex, and she didn't know if her neighbor made it out. And there is an absolute dead zone for cell service out there. And so, people are realizing that in some instances, life safety is really an issue, and emergency notification is really an issue. So that was a surprise that came out of the town council, and one that staff will further and try to determine where our deficiencies lie, and how we could integrate that in a way that minimizes adverse impacts. I mean, there are stealth trees when you drive up to Tahoe that, I've seen a lot of stealth sites, and there are some that I have to just about whiplash my neck to realize that it's actually a cell tower. And, you get those away from house. Anyway, it's a lot of granular stuff, but the point is that that's something that the council recognizes could be really, really important, especially in a constrained evacuation circumstance such as the town.
Either that or a microgrid.
Yeah, there's
Fairfax microgrid. I thought there was some plan to put one into Fairfax.
Well, I'm not an expert on communication, but that's a topic that warrants further exploration, and we will do so. The top of the list, and it's going to continue to be top of the list, is fire safety and what we're learning about that. There's studies going on relating to evacuation. Fairfax is fortunate enough to be named as one of the sites for specific study on evacuation. Unfortunately, those results aren't going to be available for a while, but it's sort of one of those implementing program questions that you get information as you receive it and use it to further your own efforts and hopefully come up with something that really makes a difference in terms of safety, public safety. And I think it will, because one of the things that we're really learning, whether it's home hardening or some of these other notions that the field of fire safety and public safety is really advancing. It's unfortunate that we're seeing that at the cost of so many properties destroyed and in many cases lives lost. But
But
people
there's
are
a
taking,
lot of funding coming down for
yeah.
fire safety and yeah,
So
clearing of forests throughout the state and
oh
local
yeah,
areas
shaded
as
fuel
well. So
breaks. Yes, and
lots
this,
of improvements there.
yeah, and this gets back to some of Commissioner Swift's comments about furthering the conversation with the emergency providers. The Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority is recognized already as one of the regional leaders. So I hope that we can continue to advance our discussions with them. So that's basically where we left it with the safety element. We will be coming up with another draft, and Andy probably doesn't need to comment on it, but our intention is to post that on the website, and it will be available for public comment right on the section. So it's again, one of these whiz bang tech tools, but it's actually very interactive. So as people read the draft safety element, they can go into something and say, hey, you didn't think about this, or what about that, or you missed this person's title, or whatever it is. They'll be able to write on the document. So I'm pretty excited about that, because again, this is an interactive tool that allows group knowledge to filter into the public discussion. And I think ultimately we all benefit from that. We recognize that meetings like this are kind of stilted affairs. I see all of 2 people from the public that are still in attendance. We'd like to think that everybody's watching it like a hawk instead of just waiting at the very end and then, a bunch of people show up and holler. But the reality is that we have these tools. There are people that can get involved, and we're putting in really major efforts to do the public engagement. And I think we're seeing results. I mean, the numbers don't always lie when you get hundreds of people involved already and continuing to be involved and really starting to pay attention, because I think they sense
and people who never had before.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That's what I find interesting.
Yeah, when you have 200 people who've commented, and you get 50 people at a heavy town council meeting, what does that say? You've got 4 times as many people as you'll ever see at any sole public hearing. So,
but you know what? We have another item to cover.
Yes, we do.
Which is the regular monthly meetings. We want to talk about perhaps changing that date. So let's.
If I could, Andy, I believe has something very brief he'd like to mention.
Oh, okay.
Very brief, I promise. It's 2 parts. First, I just want to acknowledge all the creative thinking and problem solving that I've heard in advance of our policy discussion. And I want to let everybody know here that we're taking note. We're going to be folding it in, bringing it back for discussion. A lot of the great ideas that came up today, that thinking 2 steps ahead. The thing, Ben, I want to make sure of is that we asked for a consensus count for whether or not to include Jolly Hill as we go forward to council. I think I heard 2 commissioners who said yes, 2 commissioners who said no. I don't think we heard from all commissioners.
Brett did not comment. Robert and I said yes. Cindy and Mimi said no, and Brett did not comment on Jolly Hill. Would you like to at this time, Brett?
Chair, I said yes.
And I didn't say no. I said it was premature. Over.
Oh, okay.
It's
Brett,
good to have clarity.
What's your word?
I don't know what that means to the vote, but I'll let you know that I'm so on the fence that I think that it's not a viable site, just because of the access to it and a number of other reasons. But I actually think just on principle, we should at least evaluate it and show the town that we've evaluated it.
Okay,
So, yes.
Andy, I think that gives you a consensus.
Thank you.
Somewhat.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you for your comments and your work. Very much appreciated. It's a very, very particular skill, Andy, and you do it very well. Okay, so let's talk about the possibility of changing the regularly scheduled monthly meeting. I guess the problem is that we're back to back with the town council meetings. And so, Ben, I'm assuming that you would rather we do an earlier meeting than a later meeting. the second Thursday as opposed to the fourth Thursday. Is that?
I'm actually very happy to follow whatever direction the commission wants to go. I just know that when you look at the year, how the year breaks out, the majority of the months have these meetings. That's not to say that there will be planning items at both meetings, but from a standpoint of preparing packets, and certainly, last night and tonight, back-to-back meetings, I don't think it does either group particular favors when you're scrambling to prepare for the meetings and then doing the meetings and recovering from the meetings, et cetera. So,
but so council meets the third Wednesday?
correct.
The first and third Wednesday.
And the third Wednesday. Now, I would also point out that this is something that would have to go through the town council because the third Thursday date was adopted by resolution, but obviously that recommendation would originate with your planning commission. And if your commission did not feel that it suited their schedules, I would not pursue it further.
Okay, so what I'm looking at is that in order to get away from back-to-back meetings, the third Thursday and the third Wednesday are the problem, the Wednesday, Thursday, back-to-back. So what would make sense would be to switch the planning commission to the second Thursday, and that gives you a meeting every week, but you're a week apart instead of night to day.
Right.
And I would think doing an earlier meeting might be better than doing the last Thursday of the month, so that you cover something earlier and then you have more time to go through council and come back again to the planning commission. So I would be amenable to changing to the second Thursday, but how do all the other commissioners feel? Let's just go around the room, whoever wants to speak up first.
I can't do the second Thursday. I already have a meeting on that night.
Okay. What about the fourth?
I could probably do the fourth.
I don't know if Mimi, how about you?
Yeah, I'm agnostic. I don't care.
All right. Brett?
I'll make either work.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I can make either of those.
Either one. Okay. And Robert?
Yeah, both are fine for me, Jeff.
Oh, okay. I'd have to look at the last. I suppose I could do the last. I'd prefer the second, but if everyone can do the last, of course, we haven't talked to Phil. We'll have to check with him. Do you have any sense, Ben, of?
No, I do not at this point.
Of Phil's schedule?
But I will check and report out on that as well. It sounds, it looks like, Norma, if you can determine if fourth works for you. As I said, I'm looking for unanimity because we're obviously not going to recommend anything that would bump a commissioner. You signed up for the third Thursday and you're here. But
right. Let's check if you could check with Phil then.
Yeah.
And didn't we have one other commissioner? Is he not a new one? Did we lose him or?
No, it's Esther.
No, not Esther, but didn't we have a third architect? No, just Robert and Brett. Okay.
Yeah.
And what is the situation with Esther then?
Esther had a death in her family.
Oh, that's what I was afraid of.
Yeah, and I'll email the commission.
All right, that's what I was afraid of, and they were in Arizona, which makes it all the more difficult for her. I'm very sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it's a real tragedy. So
I can understand. Okay, so I guess it's up to Phil to say if he can make the 4th. I can probably do the 4th. Let's see what Phil says.
Very good.
And so if he can't do the 4th, does everyone else want to stay with well, does everyone else want to stay with the 3rd? No, you're all saying you're flexible with either day, right?
Well, what I heard was Commissioner Swift say she wasn't available on the 2nd, and I
Oh, that's
heard
right. She's not available on the 2nd.
2 options being the 2nd Thursday and the 4th Thursday, because the 3rd Thursday isn't working. And I guess if Commissioner Green isn't available on the 4th Thursday, there's 6 other days of the week, right? We'd have to start branching off of Thursdays over.
No, but the problem is the 3rd week. It's the 3rd week where there's a council meeting and a planning commission meeting. If we change to a Tuesday, there would still be a town council meeting on Wednesday and planning commission on Tuesday.
Yeah, but I'm not suggesting the 3rd Wednesday.
Oh, okay, in the 2nd week.
Wednesday or the 4th Wednesday might not have a specific conflict with Commissioner Swift, who so far does.
Okay, let's ask her then.
On the 2nd Thursday, but I don't think we want to go there unless Commissioner Green says he's not available on the 4th Thursday, right?
Correct. And recognizing
You want it to be a Thursday, Ben.
Well, the idea is that the commission has carved out that Thursday.
There would be some
attendance,
consistency for the community as well.
Just
let's see what Phil has to say, and then
Okay.
maybe we could do. You could email us and ask us, tell us what he said, and.
Okay, but what I'm hearing is that the 4th Thursday there's a consensus that will work. So that if that works for Commissioner Green, I will probably make a recommendation to the council, at least that they consider changing it, and we'll see what they decide.
Okay, all right, and I
Thank
will
you.
take a closer look at my calendar coming up for those 4th Thursdays, but I might be able to make that work as well.
Yeah, incidentally, January is going to be real wonky for the council because with New Year's and the holidays, their first meeting is actually going to be the 19th. So
you're having all your meetings on the same week in January.
Yeah, exactly. We could change to the 2nd or whatever and end up being next to the council meeting anyway for at least for January. I know. So I'm just as glad that it's got to go to the council, because
if that's the case, we'll go back to the 3rd.
Yeah, we'll do a special meeting. Okay, so that's that item.
Okay. Do we? Well, I should have asked this when we did the agenda approval. Should we do you have a planning director's report? But we could do the meetings first since it's on the agenda as that.
Yeah, let's do the minutes.
The minutes of Thursday, November 18th. We were all there except Esther. Even Phil was there. Any comments?
I've got a spelling correction that I sent to Linda on Colin McDonald's name.
What is it?
Colin McDonald's name.
What is his name? His actual name? That's not right?
The spelling is incorrect.
Yeah.
So I just sent her the correction.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, excavation permit to parking spaces.
I have a comment.
Please do.
Which is about the draft minutes that are up on in the packet. When you open them online, they say Larkspur Planning Commission meeting is the name of the file. And so after we approve it, if we could rename the file Fairfax minutes of November 18th. I think that would be a good idea. Over.
Thank you for that catch. That's okay. How does that happen?
Does she work, take minutes for both planning commissions?
She may, but I mean, but how it's, anyway, that's because.
It's just the file name on the document.
Right. Okay. We'll fix that.
Okay, any other comments or corrections?
Well, just as an aside, in the on the town website, the packet for this meeting is not on the site, just the agenda. You know, it goes with December's packet and then October's packet, and November's agenda is there, but not the packet. So I just I sent a note to Kara and Linda about it, but just FYI. Over.
I noticed that sometimes.
Yeah, I think we were kind of resuming roles, and there was a little something. A ball got dropped temporarily, so I apologize for not including that, and we will backfill that. Okay.
No further comments then. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of the Fairfax Planning Commission meeting of November 18?
I will so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, can we take the roll
Yes.
call?
Commissioner Swift,
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly,
Aye.
Commissioner Jansen,
I,
Commissioner Newton,
Aye.
Chair Fregoso.
Aye.
Okay, 5-0 carries.
Ben, can you update us on what happened with the character of Fairfax at the town council meeting?
Yes.
And then also, gee, what else was I needing to
Senate
ask?
Bill 9, the urgency ordinance, probably.
Well, if you have information on that, but I was, one thing I noticed is that I see more music. I see people playing guitars, playing music. They're playing at Perry's. They were playing at the little Frenchy place over by the laundromat, playing music out in front of the Fairfax. Is it the guy on the piano, which I like the piano, but are we good at just having music all around town now again?
I'm not sure what's going on in that regard. I mean, a lot of it happens after hours and staff, is gone from the scene. I know that as a general rule, we go on a complaint basis and we have at least one citizen who's usually pretty diligent and hectoring the council over perceived acoustical infringements on his peace and quiet. So maybe what's happened is people are so anxious to enjoy some community spirit, and that they're willing to put up with a little bit more racket than they normally would, just kind of getting back to normal. So, but that's an interesting note, and I will carry that or keep an ear out for complaints. Linda would probably be a good source because she's the one that they usually complain to. In terms of the character, with the council, it was pointed out by Commissioner Swift that the comments and changes reflected the obsolete, for lack of a better word, housing element that was in the general plan that was adopted, the 2010 general plan. And however, at the last minute, the person, Shelley Hamilton, made the two changes to the current housing element. Those were incorporated into the recommended changes by her to the council, excising all mention of the word character from the town's general plan. Staff did present that the Planning Commission wasn't opposed to the changes per se, but believed that it warranted a more deliberative process and that there were some word choices that didn't seem to add clarity. But overall, I think the concern about unintentional racism, or whatever we want to characterize it, won the day. That and the fact that those changes weren't really considered to be substantive. And so the council did act to modify the general plan. I'm still trying to figure out with the town attorney the appropriate way to reflect the housing element changes, since the 2010 general plan's housing element is not the current housing element. So we'll sort that out and get those changes posted online so that people can see what the new language is, and make sure that when we're citing general plan policies, obviously if you see a general plan citation that uses the word character, it's wrong, because that's been canceled. So that's
Also, Ben,
yes.
something you and I talked about a while back when we were reviewing our general plan policies, our housing element policies and programs, and our objectives, our goals and objectives, and we all commented and suggested revisions to them. One of our policies is to provide housing for everyone, or provide, it's generic, provide housing for every member of the community. I think that in our policies, we could use language that is more inclusive and more equitable, not just housing for all the members of the community, but that's kind of like housing for all the characters in our community. If you ask me, I would like to see something stronger that says equitably affordable housing opportunities, all types of housing, all types and styles and sizes of housing that's affordable to all members of the community. It doesn't have to be exactly that, but you see my point in terms of our policies could be more inclusive than just changing the word character.
Yeah, I think you will see distinctly more attention paid to equity and affirmatively furthering housing.
To disabled accommodations as well. We have a very flimsy disabled accommodation.
Andy was prepared to comment at this meeting on the challenges to the Southern California government housing elements have all been based on this affirmatively furthering fair housing issue. And so that's one of the reasons, I mean, it's the right thing to do, but that's another reason why we're working so hard to, for example, reach out to Spanish speaking individuals and groups, which, by the way, we've had 2 people fill out the planned Fairfax housing survey in Spanish, which I thought was
terrific. I'll have to go check it out.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. So
okay, thank you.
Your desire is very consistent with what we have to do and are wanting to do. Other commission comments?
So a question for you on the general plan, those changes, were those considered an amendment then to the general plan, since we can amend the general plan 4 times a year? And if so, then would there be printed copies that would then be given to the library for their
Yeah, that's a good question, Commissioner Swift. At about $300 a pop, I suppose we'll have to do that. Although the library, I'd have to go back to the library and see what they're posting, because they used to have a whole shelf for planning, and then I think it started sagging.
They have a whole shelf for government
Yeah,
documents, and they do have all of our general plans there. So if we're
Okay.
making an amendment to the general plan, then we should follow that process.
yes, duly noted.
Though we're actually amending our current general plan, because yes, it goes on for how long? What's the expiration?
Till probably after we've shuffled this mortal coil. No, I'm not sure, but
2030 something, I think. Or
2030.
yeah. Well, that's the euphemistic length. We'll see.
Okay.
Other commission comments?
What's going on with bombing? I got the name wrong. The old taqueria on the corner, the bombing restaurant, the
Which one?
Vietnamese restaurant across from the roastery, right on the corner of Broadway and Bolinas.
Oh, yeah. That's an interesting question. I'll have to check it out. I don't know. You have a more acute eye than I. So that, okay. I'll check. I'll see what it is. I mean, obviously those are permitted uses, so they just basically get their business license.
Right. It's been, on its way for a long, long time. I hope they're going to come through and open it up.
I was in Monterey not too long ago, and I was talking to one of the few restaurants that were open, and they said that they'd had a 75% loss of restaurants, the vast majority of which they didn't think were going to reopen. I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal, and they're saying that restaurants are cutting back on selections. There's just a critical,
and they can't find workers.
It's a critical staff shortage. So I wouldn't be surprised it's running into some real pandemic-induced headwinds. Tough business right now.
Did we just get a text from Frank Egger?
Yeah, we're not supposed to be doing chats. I'm not sure what we're gonna have to look at the enabling
on my screen.
Yeah, I would ignore that because that's not a function that we're supposed to be incorporating. I apologize to the individual that might have done that.
Okay, and then I had one other.
Actually, we do have a member of the public. I see. Maybe he's saying my hand is up. If you want to acknowledge a member of the public speaking at the end of the meeting.
Do we do that?
I don't know how long this individual has been there.
Tamala, has Frank been there for a long time?
No, I have not seen his hand up for a super long time. I would say, I think according to Robert's Rules of Order, once you've closed public comment, you would have to close the meeting, but you could ask people to stay and listen. I'm just throwing that out
The public comment was closed, and we're on commissioner comments and requests right now. So probably better.
Did we hear the director's full report? I got confused. I thought we were.
I don't think he's finished with it.
Well, then we aren't on commissioner comments and requests.
Oh, that's right. We're on the planning director's report, so we could finish that.
So the other item I was going to comment on was the Senate Bill 9, and that the council has adopted an urgency ordinance, recognizing that as of January 1st, without an urgency ordinance, that basically almost 2,000 parcels in town would potentially be subject to a lot split and development of duplex on each lot. Realistically, that nowhere near that number could happen, but we did adopt an urgency ordinance with some standards. the Senate Bill 9 significantly relaxed standards for setbacks. They basically had no requirements for lot width. We incorporated a 20-foot wide lot width to reflect that you would need to have access to both parcels and room for would have been thinking of garbage cans out of the street, since we recognize that's a problem. We're working on a permanent ordinance. We will bring that to your commission for review when we have a little bit more information. This was a hurry up thing just to make sure that we address the most significant concerns. One of the key elements that we did incorporate was a requirement for a minimum of 20-foot road width. This is consistent with state fire minimum road standards. Not surprisingly, I think it will exclude a significant percentage of the hillside area streets, which is kind of the concern anyway. That's what has been adopted. We will also be developing another urgency ordinance. Seems like that's the way we're doing things relating to housing these days, unfortunately, but relating to accessory dwelling units, that's going to go to the council in January, and then we'll come back to your planning commission for a permanent ordinance. I can't speak to whether or not we will be able to revise that for greater clarity. That's certainly been a wish of staff, but it just comes down to, what kind of resources we have to do that, especially because, the state keeps bombing us. We will, just carry on as best we can in dealing with those issues.
Okay. Thank you. Is that all for your
That's it.
Director?
Unless you have questions for me.
Do any commissioners have questions for our planning director? Not hearing any. Do commissioners have any comments or requests?
Should we open the public planning director's report to public comment? Since there was a member in the public. That had his hand raised. Chair.
I think.
It's a new one for me. I guess we could. Ben, is it outlawed?
I think
we have to formally open.
Yeah, if you want to capture, if you want to integrate comments for the public, I would say you would be
open.
Yeah.
Open a public hearing only for the planning director's report, and with a 2-minute maximum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Frank Ager here, Meadow Way.
Hi, Frank.
The director reported on Shelley Hamilton's proposal to remove character in the general plan of housing element, and he said that the council was in the process of doing that. I just wanted to comment on that. Shelley Hamilton said that was in the 2010 Fairfax general plan, and so that they were going to remove it because of some implications. I was just reading the 1958 preliminary Fairfax general plan, and it includes this verbiage. Fairfax was a resort town with summer cabins starting to be converted to full-time residences. Then it goes on to say it includes this actual verbiage. Individual character of Fairfax housing has been preserved. How's that? They were talking about the character of Fairfax housing in 1958. It's too bad, no one dealing with the town has any institutional knowledge. I mean, that's just in the 1958 Fairfax preliminary general plan. That's all. I just wanted to make that report to you.
So, Frank, can you clarify for me? Are you in support of eliminating character or not?
No, not at all. I opposed it. I opposed it.
That's what I thought. That's what I read in the minutes. Okay. Well, thank you for your comment. And since you are the only one left standing, we will now close the public comment period again. And we'll see you next time, Frank. No further commissioner comments. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Oh, did I? No, my sound is on.
I'll make a
Motion to
motion.
Is there a motion to adjourn? Robert, was that you making a motion?
I think, yeah, both.
I
me
heard
and-
2 or 3
I mean,
people.
Correct. I made a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay. Mimi, was that you seconding?
No, that was Commissioner Swift.
Commissioner Swift, okay. Do we have to take a roll call or can we ask all in favor?
We might as well do you know what, just do all in favor.
All in favor, say aye.
Yeah, raise your hands, please.
Aye.
Okay, there you
Aye.
go.
Aye.
Any opposed? Not hearing any. We are adjourning the meeting.
Thank you very much. Good
Thank you,
night.
Ben. Thank you,
so much.
Andy.
And we
Thank-
will
Recording
be,
stopped.
Thank you, Tamala.
Yeah.
Have
20,
have a good night,
see you
everybody.
next year.
Night, everybody.
Oh my, it will be
Yeah.
next
Happy
year,
New Year.
won't it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Happy New
remember
Year.
the good
See you
old
next
days
year.
when we had holiday parties?
Uh,
We actually would go out to dinner and stuff.
virtual
Pre-COVID.
bubbly. Happy days will return someday. So thank you all. We'll catch you on the rebound.
Good night,
Good
you
night,
guys.
everybody.
All right.
Aye.
Night, night.